Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Tamed the Blue Dragon Assassin? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. 4-year-old Ryuruka was hiding beneath a secret hatch under the rug in her closet where her parents told her to hide before they went to investigate what had triggered the alarm system of their estate. Not long after they left, the sound of glass shattering, items being knocked around, yells and screams echoed throughout Ruka's large house. She heard several thumps, like a blunt object hitting bodies, and the cries of her mother and father as they desperately tried to fight off whoever was attacking them. Eventually the screams stopped and only heavy breathing was heard, accompanied by a loud clang of something metal dropping on the floor. Then someone spoke, but it wasn't either of her parents. "Search for the girl," a deep voice said as heavy footsteps sounded throughout the house. There was about 3 people total. Ruka stayed quiet, trying hard not to make a sound. She heard a set of heavy footsteps down the hallway approach her bedroom. Then the sound of her bedroom door knob turning, following by a creak of the door opening. The intruder entered her bedroom above where she was. "Hey, it's safe now. Your mom and I took care of the intruders. You can come out." A gentle voice that sounded exactly like her father's called out. But based on what Ruka heard earlier, she knew it wasn't her father. The impersonator also didn't say her name, which was another indicator that it wasn't him. She stayed where she was, holding her breath. "Come on, there's no need to hide anymore. Daddy's here," the man said in her father's voice. This time it was closer, directly above her as she heard her closet door open. Ruka continued to hold her breath. She could hear the man rummaging around in her closet before he gave up and left her bedroom. She sighed with relief that she wasn't found. But unfortunately, that was short-lived. 2 sets of footsteps approached her bedroom. One was the heavy boots from before and the other sounded like heels. They stopped in the middle of the room. "She's here. I see her," a female voice said as Ruka's heart dropped. Then she heard the pair of footsteps walk fast to her closet. She couldn't move, she was frozen in fear. A thud like someone dropping onto their knees sounded on the floorboards right above her, accompanied by the sound of heavy fabric being thrown aside. Just then, the hatch was opened and someone grabbed her and pulled her out of her hiding spot roughly. She was met face to face with a masked man and woman. She screamed, but a large hand covered her mouth. She tried to claw at the hand and kicked around, but it was no use. Then she felt a sharp prick in her neck and her vision slowly faded to black as her movements slowed. "Shoo, Daddy's got you. No need to be afraid," was the last thing she heard in her father's voice, accompanied by the smell of perfume from the woman before she fell unconscious. You didn't have to keep up the act. She knew it wasn't her father. Otherwise she would have come out when you called and I wouldn't have had to use my infrared X-ray vision. "I guess this kid's smarter than you thought, huh?" the woman said, capping the needle and putting it in her pocket. "Shut up, Nami. You got the easiest part. I had to grab and restrain her," the impersonator said as he stood up, inspecting the scratches on his hand and arm. Some of them had broken skin and he was bleeding a little. "Oh boo-hoo, you got cat scratches from a little girl. Cry me a river, Shiraku. We've got the kid now. That's all that matters. Come on, let's go you wuss. Kaito is waiting outside with the van," Nami said as she started to leave Ruka's room. "Hey, I am not a wuss," Shiraku said as he slung Ruka over his shoulder and followed Nami out of the bedroom. Time skip. Ruka woke up in an unfamiliar bed. Her head was hazy. When she came to, she realized she was hooked up to a heart monitor and she had bandages on her arms as well as metal cuffs with glowing red bands chaining her ankles to the bed. She seemed to be in some kind of hospital, but something about it was off. The air was cold and stale like she was underground. She sat up, her arms aching like she had gotten a bunch of flu shots. "You're awake." "My name is Dr. Ray and I'm the medical director of the Shadow Organization," a slender female doctor said as she entered the room. She had light skin, long wavy brown hair and bright red lipstick, and her eyes were steel gray. She wore black heels, black dress pants and a black V-neck shirt with a white doctor's coat over it and a stethoscope draped over her shoulders. "Where am I? Where's my mommy and daddy? What did you do to them?" Ruka asked, her voice getting louder with every question. Tears pricked at her eyes, threatening to leave them. The doctor came closer and knelt down to eye level. That's when she could smell it, the same perfume she smelled before she fell unconscious. "I'm sorry, we tried to save your mother and father. But it was too late. But all that matters is that you're here safe and sound. How are you feeling?" Dr. Ray said in a gentle tone, but Ruka ignored her question. "You're lying. You didn't try to save them. You murdered them." Ruka yelled, her tears flowing down her cheeks. "No, let's just calm down and take deep breaths," Dr. Ray said calmly as she reached over gently towards Ruka's hand as if to comfort her. But Ruka jerked her hand away. "Murderer!" Ruka screamed. Just then, Dr. Ray's vibe changed and her gentle demeanor then turned harsh and cold. She stood up and leaned towards her. "Listen here. If you don't cooperate, you'll be severely punished. Am I clear?" Dr. Ray snapped, which startled Ruka. The doctor's true personality was starting to show and it scared her. "Am I clear?" Dr. Ray raised her voice as Ruka just nodded her head. The doctor gave her a cold glare, then headed towards the door as two men entered the room. "Start her on the training program immediately. But first, erase all her memories up until now except for her name and the knowledge of her quirk. Don't let her know our real names. Shiraku, you'll be known as Mimic, and Kaito, your name is Echo. And I will be called Dr. Ray. Understood?" The doctor whispered to the men so that Ruka couldn't hear her. Then she walked out. The two men then approached Ruka. One of them pushed her back on the bed and held her down as she cried and struggled to break free, but to no avail. "This will be the last time you'll recognize this voice," the impersonator man said in Ruka's father's voice, followed by an evil chuckle. "Don't worry, this won't hurt a bit," the other man said. Ruka recognized that deep voice. It was the first voice she heard after her parents were murdered. He brushed two locks of her long wavy azure blue hair aside from her face and pressed his index and middle fingers on her temples near the black dragon horns on her forehead. Suddenly, she went into a state of paralysis, then sleep, as the other man let go of her. One by one, her earliest memories began to fade from her mind until she couldn't remember anything. Everything was blank. Once the man released his fingers from her head, she woke up. She sat up and blinked. Tears were flowing from her eyes for an unknown reason. "So, how are you feeling?" the impersonator said, using her dad's voice again. He was a large muscular guy with very short dark brown hair and navy blue eyes. "Why am I crying?" Ruka asked, not seeming to recognize the once familiar voice of her father. "Not sure. Maybe you had a nightmare," the other man said. He was quite a bit smaller in frame compared to the other man. He had medium short blonde hair, violet eyes, and a piercing on his right ear. "Anyways, my name is Mimic. What's your name, little one?" the impersonator said in his real voice as Ruka rubbed her eyes, confused on why his voice changed. "Why did your voice change?" Ruka asked. "Just practicing. See, my quirk is mimicking the voices of other people. The more I do it, the better I get," told Ruka. "Oh, my name is Ryu Taruka." Ruka responded. "Nice to meet you. My name is Echo." The other man named Echo introduced himself. "What's your quirk, Echo?" Ruka asked Echo curiously. "Oh, it has to do with the brain," Echo said vaguely. "Anyways, Ryutu, we need to get you started on your training program," Echo said as he unhooked the chains from the ankle cuffs that were connecting Ruka to the bed frame. "Training program?" Ruka asked curiously. "Yes. You were specially selected to participate in this training program. Your parents sent you here." Mimic lied to Ruka. "I don't remember my parents," Ruka said sadly. "Well, you weren't exactly willing to leave home, so your parents had to sedate you. Memory loss is just a side effect of the sedative." Mimic continued the lie as he helped Ruka off of the bed. "But first we need to do an assessment test to see where your quirk is at so we can determine your training regimen. Come with us," Echo said as he smiled and held out his hand to Ruka, who slowly grabbed it. They brought her to a large room with combat dummies and moving targets. They asked her to explain her quirk and give demonstrations. They removed her ankle cuffs and immediately, she had access to the dragon spirit within her. Ever since she woke up here, she could access the dragon spirit. She could sense it was there, but couldn't reach it. Ruka's quirk was called Dragon Soul. There was a dragon spirit that resided within her. She could manifest the spirit and command it to attack enemies, call on its power to enhance her abilities, or even transform either partially or fully into a dragon herself. There was a prophecy concerning the Dragon Soul users, hinting that it had been passed down through generations even before quirks started appearing. Dragon Soul users didn't start showing abilities until the first quirks started manifesting, meaning that the dragon spirits must have been dormant until then. The prophecy went as follows. Since ancient times 8 dragons choose the vessels that their spirits use. Through generations all will be male, until disaster makes us frail. When countries start to fall apart, comes last dragon's beating heart. With her, the dragon holds its ties. And with her death, the dragon dies. Ruka's family was the last remaining of 8 families that possessed the Dragon Soul quirk. Up until now, all the Dragon Soul users had been male even in the other families, but she was the first female to inherit the Dragon Soul quirk in history. According to the prophecy, she was the last Dragon Soul user. Once she was done showing off her quirk's abilities, that was the last time things were easy for her. From then on, she went through rigorous training, physical, mental, and emotional. They also put together special training to suit her quirk. Ruka was being trained to be an assassin, cold, emotionless, honed to kill. If she didn't meet her goals or showed emotion or weakness during training, she was harshly disciplined, enduring torture that would almost break her. She had many scars all over her body from those punishments. Her living situation wasn't comfortable, but it provided the necessities. But other than that, she was well fed with proper nutrition and given proper medical care when needed. After all, she needed to be in top shape to be an effective assassin. By the time she took on her first assignment, she was 11 years old with 7 years of training under her belt. It was a success, earning her the right to accept more assignments. From then on, she quickly climbed the ranks. Before long, she was one of the top assassins in the Shadow organization, even outranking some that had been there longer than her. But there were a couple times when she couldn't complete her assignments. She was disciplined like she was when she failed to meet her training goals. But after the second time, she decided never again would she falter. And she didn't. Ruka had built a reputation for herself. She was infamous among the underworld of Japan and the heroes alike. She was pretty much the pinnacle of assassins nationwide. Ruka was known as the Blue Dragon Assassin due to her quirk and the blue dragon stamp she left on her victims' bodies. And like her organization's name implied, she was like a shadow, silent, lurking behind her targets, and gone once said targets dropped dead. But as she would soon discover, even the infamous Blue Dragon Assassin of the Shadow organization could falter again. It was Saturday evening, May 18th, and Ruka had just received an assignment from a Shatigashira of the Shai Hasaikai Yakuza group to assassinate a man that was apparently causing them trouble. When she video chatted with the Shatigashira, he didn't reveal his face and seemed to be using a voice changer, which she found a little odd. But it paid good money, so she wasn't too concerned about it and just shrugged it off as the guy just being cautious and secretive. The Shatigashira described her target as a tall, very skinny man with dark eyes and sharp angular facial features, long lanky limbs, and messy, wavy blonde hair with 2 long strands that hang down from his hairline framing his face. He informed her that her target wore baggy clothing. He also wanted the man dead by 7:30 p.m. It wasn't common that Ruka was given a deadline, but it did happen sometimes, so that didn't really raise any red flags either. And with that information, she geared up. Ruka wore sleek black jeans that hugged her hips and legs, black combat boots, and a black denim utility jacket over an open black collared button-down short sleeve over a purple crop top in which the sleeves slightly showed below her black shirt sleeves. She also wore a black ski scarf on her neck. She rolled back the sleeves of her utility jacket and strapped 2 hidden blades to her arms and rolled down her sleeves over them. Then she grabbed several throwing knives, a karambit knife, and a few daggers and put them in the designated pockets of her utility jacket. Okay, I'm all suited up. Now the Shatigashara said that my target was last seen hanging around outside the mall in Mizudafu. That's not far from here. I can probably walk there. Ruka said as she grabbed 2 silenced pistols and clicked the fully loaded magazines in. Then she put the pistols in specialized pocket holsters on the inside of her utility jacket. Ruka may have had the ability to summon a powerful dragon spirit from within her to fight or even transform into a huge dragon herself, but that would draw too much attention, so she usually used her quirk to enhance her physical abilities or partially transform into a dragon in combination with various weapons. It was only when she was in a secluded area against large groups of enemies that she used the dragon spirit or her full body transformation. Ruka left the Shadow Organization's secret headquarters through one of the hidden entrances to go scope out her target. Time skip. Ruka made it to the mall in Mizudafu and started scouting the area for her target, walking around casually to avoid suspicion. The sun was starting to set when she eventually found him. He wore a tan spring jacket and white t-shirt way too large for him and baggy green pants. He was talking on the phone, walking away from the mall. She followed him at a distance, occasionally stopping to look at her phone to blend in with the crowd. Her target didn't even appear to notice her following him. He then walked towards a dark alleyway and turned into it. Ruka didn't follow him into the alleyway right away because that would be too obvious. Instead, she waited until no one was looking and sprouted dragon wings and flew to the top of the small shop building next to the alleyway and crouched, looking down into the dark space between the 2 buildings. The man hung up the phone and just stood there like he was waiting for someone. Ruka stood her ground and waited to see if someone was going to meet up with him. Another time skip. 10 minutes had passed and no one came to meet up with the guy. And he still stood there like he was waiting for someone, checking his watch. She found this situation a little peculiar, but thought maybe this was just a drag dealing which was common in the Yakuza. Maybe this guy was a rival Yakuza selling drags outside his territory and he went to the wrong meetup spot. Ruka then checked her phone for the time. It read 7:25 p.m. She had to off this guy and submit proof by 7:30 p.m. She had no choice, she had to jump in now. She pulled up her ski scarf up over her nose and leaped off the building and did a front flip in midair before landing softly, thanks to her dragon wings. "I'm sorry, but your time is up," Ruka said as she whipped out a pistol and aimed at the man. The moment she pulled the trigger, there was a cloud of steam and the man was gone. Just then something landed behind her. Before she could turn around to see what it was, someone large grabbed her and put her in a sleeper hold. His arms were so large, they trapped her arms against her torso with ease. There was no way she could access the weapons in her jacket. She was starting to lose consciousness, dropping her gun in the process. "Sheet. I'm going to faint if I don't do something. Looks like I have no choice," Ruka said mentally as she summoned the dragon spirit which emerged from her chest. The huge blue spectral dragon's red eyes glowed as it flew above and behind Ruka and the man and lunged. The man let go of her immediately and leaped out of the way to avoid getting injured by the dragon spirit. It was then that Ruka realized who the man was. It was All Might, the world's #1 hero. "Haha, I bet you're surprised that I am here," All Might said as Ruka hissed out of frustration and quickly picked up her gun and pulled out her other one and fired at the pro hero multiple times, but he was too fast and dodged every bullet. Normally she was an extremely good shot, but that was against people who weren't astronomically fast or who weren't expecting it. All Might got to her again, grabbing her wrists so that she couldn't shoot him. Ruka then called on the dragon spirit to grant her extra strength as her arms and legs transformed into dragon limbs, but it wasn't enough to overpower him. She tried kicking him multiple times in the abdomen next. And while that made him wince slightly, he wouldn't let go of her arms. She was left with no choice again. She transformed into a huge full-body blue dragon with red eyes. She started to lift him off the ground as she grew in size, barely fitting the alleyway anymore. All Might immediately let go and jumped back, kicking off the ground and landing a sharp uppercut to Ruka's chin, knocking her out. Her dragon form shrank and shifted as she returned to her base human form. She couldn't maintain her dragon form if she was unconscious. Turning into her huge dragon form destroyed her clothes, so she was now naked. All Might took off his spring jacket and put it on her body before scooping her up into his arms. He stared at her as her long wavy azure blue hair fell loosely from her head, her black dragon horns glinting in the moonlight. She's so young. All Might said to himself just as the police, Detective Tsukachi Naomasa, and Principal Nizu arrived at the scene. Looks like the plan was a success. Principal Nizu said as he approached All Might. So this is the infamous Blue Dragon assassin, huh? I wasn't expecting her to be a teenager. The detective said, inspecting Ruka's face. A police officer came over and put quirk-canceling cuffs on Ruka's wrists. This is a surprise indeed. Principal Nizu said before they took her to the police station. They called over Best Jeanist to fix her clothing since the police station didn't really have any clothing available in Ruka's size at the moment. While they waited for her to regain consciousness, they talked amongst each other. Hey, I did some digging on finding her real identity. And I found out she looks just like the girl that went missing 11 years ago from the Rita household, Ruka. Her parents were found to have been bludgeoned to death by a crowbar, but Ruka was never found. According to this file, she should be 15 years old now. Detective Tsukachi said as he brought a folder of documents on a case. Great work, detective. So she was only 4 years old when she was kidnapped. All Might said. Killings by the Blue Dragon assassin didn't start surfacing until about 4 years ago, which means she was only 11 years old when she started taking on assignments. Detective Tsukachi said. She may be young, but she has a strong quirk. Not only that, she's well trained with weapon usage in combat. She's probably really proficient in hand-to-hand combat too, though she wasn't really able to exercise that much with me being her opponent. But her reflexes and instincts are sharp as well. All Might said. She's a killer forged in the depths of the underworld. Detective Tsukachi added as he folded his arms across his chest. Yes, but she could become a great hero if given the right guidance. Principal Nizu said as he put his paw up to his chin, his eyes glinting. Wait, you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. It's way too dangerous. Detective Tsukachi said frantically. Yes, indeed I am. Don't worry, we'll take the proper precautions necessary to ensure the safety of our students and staff. Besides, it would be a waste to let such potential to be locked up for life. Principal Nizu said to the detective. It's still too risky. Not to mention, the public's view of the heroes if things go south. Detective Tsukachi raised his voice slightly at the UA High principal. UA High will take full responsibility. Principal Nizu said as the detective sighed. That's not the point. Detective Tsukachi said, pinching the bridge of his nose out of frustration. Just then, a police officer approached them. She's awake and dressed now. She's waiting in the interrogation room. The police officer informed them. Short time skip. Ruka was sitting calmly in the interrogation room with quirk-canceling cuffs chaining her wrists together. Suddenly the door opened and Detective Tsukachi entered the room. Hello. My name is Detective Tsukachi Naomasa. What's your name? The detective asked Ruka as he sat down on the chair at the table across from her. Don't you already know who I am? Ruka asked the detective. Well, I know you're the Blue Dragon assassin. And I have a fairly good guess on what your real name is, but I don't want to make any assumptions here. Detective Tsukachi responded as Ruka sighed and rolled her eyes. It's Ryuto Ruka. Ruka introduced herself to the detective who nodded his head. Thank you, Miss Ryuto. I have a question for you. Can you remember anything from when you were 4 years old or younger? Like any memories of your family or the house you grew up in? Detective Tsukachi said as Ruka leaned back in her chair, thinking for a moment. No. The earliest memory I have is waking up in a hospital bed with 2 men by my side named Mimic and Echo. Anything else before that is completely blank. They told me that my parents sent me there for a special training program I was chosen for. According to them, my parents had to sedate me since I was uncooperative and unwilling to leave home, and that the memory loss was a side effect of the sedative. I have no recollection of my past before then. Ruka told the detective. He scanned her facial expression for signs that indicated lying, but he found none. She was telling the truth. Listen, Miss Ryu, 11 years ago, a couple was murdered. a man named Ryuta Yushin and a woman named Ryuta Mika. Their daughter Ryuta Ruka wasn't found among the bodies, so she was presumed to have been kidnapped. Investigations were done and search parties were launched, but there were no clues to her whereabouts. Then 7 years later, killings of the Blue Dragon assassins start to surface. Fast forward to today, we catch you, the Blue Dragon assassin, who happens to have the same name as the missing child from 11 years ago and looks exactly like her. Also, about your memory loss. There are no sedatives, not even strong ones, that have side effects that can erase memories to that extent. Your memories were removed by someone's quirk. Detective Tsukachi told Ruka, who just sat there in her chair, her expression remaining the same. But something flickered in her eyes, shock, hurt, and a bit of rage as she drew the connections in her mind. So let me get this straight. I was kidnapped, my memories were erased on purpose, and I was forced to become one of Japan's deadliest assassins. Ruka said, leaning forward as the detective nodded. That is the gist of it, yes. Detective Tsukachi said, folding his hands together on the table. Ruka leaned back in her chair again. There was an awkward silence for a moment until she spoke. Am I going to go to Tartarus after this? Ruka asked the detective, who paused for a second. About that, Detective Tsukachi started to say, but was interrupted by Principal Nizu and All Might entering the room. Thanks, detective. We'll take it from here. Principal Nizu said as the detective nodded and got up from the chair and left the room. Hello, Ryuta. I am Nizu, the principal of UA High. And this is All Might, as you probably already know. Principal Nizu introduced himself and All Might as he climbed onto the chair across the table from Ruka. Young Ryuta, we have an opportunity for you. How would you like to become a hero? All Might said to Ruka, who raised an eyebrow before letting out a laugh, almost a cackle. She slapped her hand on the table as she laughed. When she calmed down, she spoke. Me? A hero? You've got to be joking. Do you even know who you're talking to? I'm the Blue Dragon assassin. I kill like it's as easy as breathing. I don't think I'd fit into your ranks very well. And what would the public think about it? Ruka said. We are well aware of your background, but you have exceptional potential, and if guided in the right direction, you could become something better. It would be a complete waste for someone like you to be locked up for the rest of your life. Besides, UA High is willing to take full responsibility. That is, if you agree to take up on our offer. Principal Nizu said as he folded his paws together and flicked his tail. Ruka sighed and leaned back in her chair as she thought for a moment. So what'd I say? All Might asked Ruka, who sat back up. It's either UA High or Tartarus, right? Fine. I suppose I'd rather go to UA High. Ruka said as Principal Nizu's eyes practically sparkled. Excellent. I must warn you though, you will be under strict surveillance and will be wearing quirk-canceling cuffs at all times when not in hero training. And you must be escorted to and from classes by a staff member. Principal Nizu informed Ruka, who rolled her eyes. Lovely. Ruka said, her voice laced with sarcasm. Students are currently at their internships right now, but will resume classes as normal on Monday. You'll remain here until then, understood? Principal Nizu said, his tail flicking slightly. Yes, sir. Ruka said with little enthusiasm. Principal Nizu nodded and hopped off the chair. Then he and All Might began to leave the room. But before they exited through the door, Principal Nizu turned around. It was a pleasure talking with you. I expect great things from you in the near future. The principal said before shutting the door behind him and All Might. This is gonna be interesting. Ruka thought to herself. It was Monday, May 20th, and it had been 2 days since Ruka was caught. Starting today, she was going to be attending UA High for rehabilitation from villainy. Ruka put on the UA uniform she was given and black sheer tights and black combat boots. She was also given a red book bag with the textbooks she would need plus some basic school supplies in it. The sleeves of the uniform blazer fit over her quirk-canceling cuffs so that they were barely visible. She then tied her long wavy azure blue hair up in a high ponytail, leaving 2 strands of hair hanging loose from her hairline framing her face. Once she was ready, she waited at the front of the police station for her ride to pick her up. A sleek black car pulled up and the driver's side window rolled down, revealing a worn-out-looking man with stubbly facial hair and black messy shoulder-length hair that partially hung down in front of his face. "You're Ryuta Ruka, correct?" The man asked Ruka in a voice as worn out as his appearance. She didn't speak, just nodding. "Get in the car, please," the man said as Ruka did as she was told. Once she closed the door behind her, she put on her seatbelt and they took off to UA High. "I'm Mr. Aizawa, the homeroom teacher of Class 1A. From now on, you'll be primarily under my supervision. If you misbehave, I will not hesitate to contact the Hero Public Safety Commission to have them take you to Tartarus. Am I clear?" Mr. Aizawa said as he drove to the prestigious Hero High School. "Yes, sir," Ruka said as she crossed her arms over her chest and slumped in the back seat of the car. "This is the seating arrangement. Your desk is the lone front one. These people will be your classmates from now on. Please do your best to get along with them," Mr. Aizawa said, handing Ruka a sheet of paper, showing the layout of the classroom and a picture of each student with their names and where they sat. On the way to the school, Ruka took the time to commit the faces and names to memory. Time skip. They arrived at UA High and Mr. Aizawa drove the car past the school gates. As soon as he did, the school's security system activated, acting several very tall and thick metal walls so no one could get in or out. He parked the car in the parking lot and got out of the driver's seat. He then opened the back door so Ruka could get out. She exited the car and shut the door. Mr. Aizawa led her to the classroom labeled 1A and opened the door. All the students were already there in their seats, still talking about their internships. "Sorry I'm late. I had to pick up the new student that will be joining us today. Her name is Ryuta Ruka. She is going to be your classmate from now on. So please try to get along with her," Mr. Aizawa said as Ruka stepped into the doorway. All eyes were on her as she entered the classroom. There were murmurs among the students. Despite her new classmates trying not to let Ruka hear what they were saying, she heard every single word. She had exceptional senses, especially sight, hearing, and smell. "I saw her on the news recently. She's the infamous Blue Dragon assassin," Kirishima whispered to Kaminari. "The Blue Dragon assassin? Are you serious?" Kaminari said out of shock. So the rumors were true. They really did let a villain attend UA High. Mineta said quietly, starting to tremble in his seat. "Is it really okay for someone like her to be at this school?" Jiru asked in a hushed voice. Those words stung a bit. Ruka already felt out of place in an environment like this, but that comment just singled her out even more. She scanned the room with her crimson eyes as she slowly walked to her seat, making eye contact with every single one of her classmates one by one. Almost all of them gave her wary looks, except for one boy with messy green hair. His gaze was analytical and curious, not judgmental like the rest. When their eyes met, it almost seemed like a faint blush lightly dusted his cheeks. That green-haired boy's a peculiar one. Unlike the rest, his eyes don't seem to be judging me. Was he blushing? Ruka thought to herself as she sat down in her seat. Izuku's POV. All Might told me I was going to get a new classmate today named Ryuta Ruka. He told me some details about her, that she was the villain that he captured a couple days ago and she was here for rehabilitation purposes. Apparently, she's a notorious villain from the Japanese underworld. That made me curious, why would UA High accept such a high-risk student? There must have been a good reason. Principal Nizu must have seen something in her beyond her criminal record. When Ryuta entered the classroom, I noticed how all my classmates just judged her right away. They started whispering among each other. She took the time to look each of us in the eye with an icy stare, while walking slowly to her seat as if analyzing something. I couldn't help but stare at her as she moved. When our eyes locked, I felt my face heat up slightly. I hope that wasn't too visible. End of Izuku's POV. Shortly after Ruka sat down, Mr. Aizawa spoke. He announced that they would be doing hero basic training right away. Shelves containing everyone's hero costumes in briefcases emerged from the classroom walls. Each student stood up excitedly and grabbed their hero costumes, heading towards the locker rooms. Midnight accompanied Ruka to the girls' locker room. She kept tabs on her while in the locker room. The other girls kept their distance from her. only getting close if they needed to put something in the locker adjacent to hers. Ruka opened the case that contained her costume. It was a skin-tight, sleek, backless, deep blue scale pattern bodysuit that perfectly matched the color of her dragon scales when transformed. There were no weapons like she was used to when suiting up. Right, this was hero training, not assassin training. Ruka took off her school uniform, revealing the numerous scars on her body from the harsh punishments she received in the past. The girls didn't dare ask where she got them. Once she was done changing, they left the locker room to meet up with the boys at Field Gamma Training Ground. Midnight took off the quirk-canceling cuffs, handed them to All Might, and went on her way now that another staff member was present. Some of Ruka's classmates stared at the scars visible on her back where her bodysuit didn't cover her skin. So, where did you get those scars? Bet they're from intense badass battles, right? Kirishima said, trying to start some small talk with Ruka. I didn't get these scars from battles with my targets. Usually my victims barely even saw me coming. Ruka said in a low, calm tone. Before anyone else had a chance to ask, she answered. They're from punishments. If I didn't reach my training goals or failed to complete an assassination assignment, I was harshly disciplined. Every time, the torture was brutal, almost enough to break me. Ruka said as the whole class went silent until All Might spoke. I am here. Hope you're ready to return to our lessons. Today is Hero Basic Training. Feels like I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. And welcome Ryuta Ruka. Now then, listen carefully for what's in store. We're going to be conducting a little race. Take everything you've learned from your internships and apply it to this rescue training. All Might said as Ida raised his hand. If it's rescue training, then shouldn't we be at the USJ instead? Ida asked. That facility specializes in disasters. As I said earlier, this is a race. So, prepare. You're about to step into Field Gamma. Inside is an area full of factories that form an intricate labyrinth, so good luck finding your way around. You'll be competing in groups of 5 except for one group which will have 6 students because young Ryuta will be participating as well. Each person starts from a different location on the outskirts of the model city. I'll send a distress signal and you do what you must to rescue me. Whoever finds me first wins. But try to keep property damage to a bare minimum, please. All Might said, pointing towards Bakugo. Why are you pointing at me? Bakugo said in an irritated tone as he averted his gaze to the side. Alright. First group, get to your places. All Might said as Shiro, Ashido, Ojiro, Ida, Izuku, and Ruka took their places in Field Gamma. All Might then sent the distress signal and the race began. Dragon Soul, partial transformation. Ruka said as she activated her quirk and sprouted dragon wings from her shoulder blades, the backless part of her bodysuit. She jumped off the factory building and flapped her wings, soaring above all the obstacles of the life-size model factories below. Shiro used his tape, swinging through the jungle gym of pipes and buildings. Ojiro used his tail to fling himself off of surfaces. Ida used his speed to dash around through the maze of structures on the ground. Ashido used her acid to melt into the structures to secure her to surfaces she landed on. And Izuku, he bounced off of the buildings as teal lightning sparked around his body. All of his classmates seemed surprised at his movements. He was in the lead until he landed on a pipe and his foot slipped, which cost him first place. Ruka ended up taking first place a split second before Shiro reached All Might. And it's over. Thanks, hero. And congratulations. All Might said to Ruka, handing her a sash for earning first place. Ruka sighed and rolled her eyes at the word hero as she put the victory sash on over her shoulder. She looked over at Izuku, who was laying flat on his face. Ida was checking up on him as Ashido and Shiro threw fits out of frustration. Ojiro rubbed his forehead out of disappointment. That's so not fair. Ryu can fly and skip the whole obstacle course. Ashido said, crossing her arms across her chest. Ruka just rolled her eyes at her comment. Young Rita may have come in first, but compared to the start of the year you all showed me some incredible improvements. Keep working and preparing for your upcoming final exams. All Might said as everyone stood up straight except for Izuku. Sir. Ashido, Ida, Ojiro, Shiro, and Izuku said. Group 1, leave the wheel. You're up Group 2. All Might said as everyone except Izuku started leaving the field. All Might approached him instead of following the group of students out of the training ground. Ruka stopped in her tracks and looked back at them. Wasn't she supposed to be accompanied by a staff member at all times? And there weren't any other teachers in sight. She didn't want to get in trouble for not following protocols, so she stayed behind and waited for All Might. You surprised me. That's incredible. Find me after class, we need to talk. All Might said to Izuku in a low voice with a thumbs up. Yes sir. Izuku said as All Might turned around, looking back at him. The time has come to tell you the whole truth. About me and one for all. All Might said with a serious tone. I wonder what that was about. Ruka thought to herself after she overheard All Might talking to Izuku. But then something clicked in her mind. When she was set up by the heroes, her target was All Might. She saw the transformation herself. His body build was gaunt and lanky at first, but right when she was about to assassinate him, he transformed into the unmistakable form of the #1 pro hero. Was one for all the name of All Might's quirk? After all, he never mentioned what the name of his quirk was in interviews. And why was he talking to this guy about it? Maybe the symbol of peace was losing his power and he needed to entrust the role to someone else, and Izuku was his choice to be his successor. Sorry about that. I had to talk to young Midoriya about something. All Might said as he pulled the quirk-canceling cuffs out of his pocket and clicked them shut around Ruka's wrists. She felt the connection with the dragon spirit disappear instantly as soon as the center band on the cuffs glowed red. Time skip. After class, all the students headed home except for Izuku, who went to go meet All Might. Mr. Aizawa led Ruka to Principal Nizu's office. Please have a seat, Ryudo. So how was your first day at UA High? Principal Nizu asked Ruka, who sat down in a chair across from him as Mr. Aizawa stood nearby, leaning against the wall. It was okay. I got first place in the rescue race. Ruka said as Principal Nizu clapped his paws together once. Excellent, congratulations. I knew you had great potential. Keep up the good work. Principal Nizu said, praising Ruka on her accomplishment. But pretty much all my classmates judged me before they even got to know me. I don't really feel welcome, like I don't belong here. Ruka complained, sighing as she slumped back in the chair. It's not like it was my fault that I was trained as an assassin. According to both the police and the Shadow Organization, I was taken against my will and forced to be an assassin. The big difference between the two stories is that my parents were actually killed instead of willingly handing me over. Ruka said, folding her arms across her chest. Of course it wasn't your fault. You were a victim of unfortunate circumstances, forced into the life you've come to know. Principal Nizu said, picking up a tea kettle and poured himself a cup of tea and sipped it. So now that the school day is over, where am I gonna go? I can't exactly go back to where I came from. Since I failed my assignment, I'll be brutally beaten. Even if it was a setup by you heroes. Ruka voiced her concern. You don't need to worry about that, Ryu. The school is building dormitories that the students will move into soon. The dorm building for Class 1A has already been completed. You will stay there when classes aren't in session. But you must be accompanied to and from the dorm building by a staff member. Principal Nizu said as Ruka rolled her eyes and blew air out of her mouth, her lips flapping lazily as she did so. Final exams are coming up in a little more than a month. I understand that you haven't been here to learn all the material that will be covered. I am willing to allow for you to be exempted from the exam. Principal Nizu said. But something didn't really sit right with Ruka. Hold on, if I'm here for rehabilitation to become a hero, then why am I getting excluded from taking the exam? I get that I haven't attended UA High from the beginning of the school year, but I'm going to have to learn it all eventually, right? And I don't want to be held back while all of my classmates graduate without me. My pride won't allow it. Let me take the exams. Ruka said firmly, standing up from her seat as Principal Nizu took another sip of his tea. I suppose you do have a point. Very well then. You may take the exam like everyone else. I wish you good luck in your studies. If you would like, I can have a student in your class help you study for the written portion of the exam. Just tell me who you'd like to be your study partner and I will make it so. Principal Nizu said as Ruka sat back down and thought for a moment. She wasn't close to any of her classmates since this was her first day meeting everyone. Aside from that, almost all of them seemed to be extremely wary of her since she came from a villainous background. But there was one student that didn't really seem to judge her based on her criminal record. And that was Izuku. But Ruka was going to have to cram a total of about 3 months' worth of material in little more than 1 month's time. So having a study partner would be crucial to her success. And maybe she might even make a new friend, her first real friend. Ruka's life before being captured by the heroes was pretty solitary. The only people she really interacted with beforehand were her trainers and occasionally Mimic, Echo, and Dr. Ray back at the Shadow Organization, and that wasn't really social interaction. Fine. I suppose I'll need all the help I can get in order to pass the exams. I'll pick Midoriya Izuku for my study partner. At least he doesn't seem to judge me like the rest of them do. Ruka said as Principal Nizu smiled, climbing off his chair and started walking towards the door. Very well. I'll let Midoriya know. That's all for today. Thank you, Ryu. You may head out now. Mr. Aizawa, please escort her to the Class 1A dorms. Principal Nizu said as he opened the door to his office and politely gestured towards the exit. Ruka stood up and started following Mr. Aizawa to the dormitory building she was going to be staying at. When they got to her room, Mr. Aizawa gave her a key to the door. Now I want you to stay in the dorm building. If you try to escape, the school's security system will go off and you will be sent straight to Tartarus. Do you understand? Mr. Aizawa said with a firm voice. Ruka sighed and nodded her head. Yes, sir. Ruka said as she unlocked her dorm room with the key Mr. Aizawa gave her. She then went inside and he walked away, leaving her alone in the empty dorm building. Ruka looked around her dorm room. There was a simple bed, an empty desk, and a dresser. She put her book bag down and walked over to the dresser. She opened the dresser drawers one by one to find several school uniforms and UA gym uniforms, pajamas, underwear, and some casual clothes for when she wasn't in class. They were all in her size. Since she couldn't exactly go back to the Shadow Organization's headquarters to fetch her belongings, the school provided her with new clothes to wear. That was nice of them. I suppose I could get used to this life. Ruka said as she closed the dresser drawer and walked over to her bed and flopped down onto the mattress. She put her hands behind her head as she laid on the bed. Not bad. The bed is pretty comfortable. But I don't have time to rest. I have to study hard to pass my exams. Ruka said as she sat up and went to her dresser and changed into some comfy pajamas. Then she grabbed her book bag and pulled out her textbooks and started studying late into the night until she collapsed from exhaustion. Ruka had fallen asleep in the middle of studying, a textbook laying on her stomach as she slept. Suddenly, a knock on her dorm room door woke her up. She sat up and rubbed her eyes, the textbook falling into her lap as she did so. I am here to wake you up. You don't want to be late for class, do you, young Ryu? All Might's cheery voice sounded on the other side of Ruka's door. Yeah. I'm up. Just give me a sec. I need to get ready. Ruka called out as she stretched and packed her school materials back into her backpack. Then she changed out of her pajamas and into her school uniform. When she was done getting ready, she opened her door to see All Might standing there with that bright smile of his. He accompanied her to the main school building and to her classroom where her classmates were waiting for Mr. Aizawa to arrive and start teaching. The class went silent as Ruka stepped through the doorway and walked to her seat. Shortly after, Mr. Aizawa entered the classroom and the school day began with core classes. Time skip. The bell had just rung, signaling the start of lunch break, and Class 1A headed to the cafeteria to eat. Just as Izuku was about to head out the classroom door, Principal Nizu stopped him. Midoriya, may I have a word with you? Principal Nizu asked Izuku, who gulped, thinking he may have gotten into trouble somehow. As if reading his mind, Principal Nizu spoke before Izuku even had the chance to ask if he had done anything wrong. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Actually, I have a request to ask of you. Principal Nizu said as a puzzled expression made its way onto Izuku's face. What is it, sir? Izuku asked the principal, who had climbed onto the teacher's desk and sat down. I would like for you to help Ryu with her studies after classes, be her tutor if you will. Principal Nizu said as he crossed his legs and folded his paws together on his lap. Izuku became even more puzzled. You know how final exams are coming up in about a month. Ryuta didn't want to be omitted from taking the exams just because she hasn't been here from the start of the year to learn all the material that will be covered. But that means she's going to have to catch up on everything that she's missed in order to pass. Principal Nizu explained further. But wouldn't Yayorozu be a better study partner? I mean, she's the smartest student in the class. Izuku suggested. Midoriya, Ryuta specifically asked for you. Principal Nizu said as he unfolded his paws and placed them on his knees, his eyes glinting with a seriousness that made Izuku freeze. Emi? She asked for me? Izuku asked as the principal nodded his head. Can you do this for me, Midoriya? Principal Nizu asked Izuku, who got a determined look on his face. Yes, sir. I will do my best. Midoriya said as Principal Nizu smiled contently and slid off the teacher's desk. Glad to hear. I appreciate it, Midoriya. You may head to lunch now. Principal Nizu said as he left the classroom. Izuku left as well and headed towards the cafeteria. When he got there, he grabbed some food, then looked around for a place to sit. He saw his friends Uraraka and Ida already sitting together. His other classmates were scattered throughout the cafeteria in their own little cliques. Then he spotted Ruka, sitting alone at her own table. Everyone avoided her, even students from other classes. Apparently, she was more well-known than Izuku initially thought. He had heard about her because he was a hero nerd and a few pro-heroes were among her victims. Even though she was a killer, she didn't appear to be a bad person deep down. Uraraka and Ida noticed Izuku and waved at him and gestured for him to join them. But then he looked at Ruka again. She looked so lonely. He looked at his friends again, gave them an apologetic smile, then headed towards Ruka's table. Izuku sat down at her table across from her, making her look up from her bowl. Hey, I know we haven't spoken before, but I'm Midoriya Izuku. Izuku said in a friendly manner, giving Ruka a wide smile. I know. Ruka said as she took a bite of her food, and an awkward silence ensued between them. Then Izuku spoke again. I was told by Principal Nizu that you wanted someone to help you study for the final exams. Izuku mentioned. Yeah, that's right. Ruka said, continuing to eat her lunch. Another awkward silence followed. Man, Ruka really wasn't much of a talker. There was something Izuku was itching to know. So, why did you want me specifically to be your study partner? Izuku asked Ruka right as she was just about to take another bite of her food. She paused, then put her chopsticks down. Why do you want to know? Ruka asked, not answering Izuku's question. It's just that, I'm not the smartest student in our class. In fact, I have to work harder than everyone else just to keep up with them. Izuku said as Ruka slightly furrowed her brows. What? Are you bad at academics? Ruka asked Izuku. What? No, it's just kinda complicated. Izuku said, hoping that Ruka wouldn't ask any more on the subject. She studied his face, honing in on every movement of his facial muscles, analyzing his expression with critical accuracy. She noticed the tiny beads of sweat forming on his brow. He was hiding something, a secret that could potentially change the world if it was leaked out to the wrong person or group. She raised an eyebrow, then leaned back slightly in her seat. I won't pry. If you don't want to tell me the secret concerning your quirk, then don't. As long as your grades don't CK, I'm fine with studying with you. Ruka said as Izuku breathed a sigh of relief, but then paused when he realized something. Wait, was he that obvious? Wait, how did you? Izuku asked, his sentence trailing off as a slight look of amusement made its way onto Ruka's face. Assassins must be highly perceptive to be effective. I've learned to read the tiniest twitch in people's facial expressions, shifts in their bodies, and movements of the eyes. But you don't have to worry about me spilling the beans. Assassins are known to be very secretive, and I'm no exception. Ruka explained. Right. Thanks, Ryudu. Izuku said as he grinned while scratching the back of his head. Most people avoid me here because of my reputation. So why did you decide to sit with me? Ruka asked Izuku. Well, we're going to be study partners, so I was hoping to get to know you a little. And to be honest, I don't think you're a bad person deep down. After all, you're working hard to become a hero despite your background. I don't think someone who was truly bad would even try to become a hero. Izuku said before taking a bite of his food. It was either this or Tartarus. Ruka said as she continued to eat her lunch. Say what you will, but I really don't believe you're a bad person. Izuku said as Ruka scoffed at his remark. Heh, tell that to my kill count and all the other students here. Ruka said as she finished eating and stood up. See you in and after class, Midoriya. Ruka said as she walked away and took care of her dishes. Izuku finished his lunch shortly after and took care of his dishes and headed back to the classroom. Time skip. After basic hero training was over, Mr. Aizawa accompanied Ruka to the dorm building with Izuku following close behind. They took the elevator to floor 2F where her dorm room was. Ruka let Izuku into her room. I didn't know the school had dorms. Izuku said while looking around Ruka's room. Yeah, well apparently they just finished this building. They're still building the dorm buildings for the other classes. They let me move in early because I have nowhere else to go. You guys will be moving in later on. Ruka said as she set down her book bag and pulled out her textbooks. Izuku did the same. So where are you in your studies right now? Izuku asked Ruka as she handed her textbooks to Izuku. The bookmarks mark how far I've gotten with self-studying. One thing you should know about me is I don't move on in a subject until I understand it. Ruka said as Izuku opened each textbook to the bookmark to see what chapter she was on in each subject. He noticed that some of the subjects she was right where she needed to be, but some subjects she was a bit behind in. Wow, you got pretty far on your own in one night. Izuku said, seeming impressed by the progress Ruka made by herself. He handed the textbooks back to her. I stayed up late to get as far as I have. I'm pretty much already up to date on language arts, classical Japanese, math and science, foreign languages, English, and history social studies since I received schooling during my time in the Shadow Organization. Also, my training there pretty much covered hero course subjects like quirk-based physics, quirk combat non-quirk combat, and the first aid portion of first aid and rescue techniques. So those were easy to understand. Ruka explained as she picked out the textbooks of the subjects she was the most behind in, which was foundational hero studies, hero history and villain history, agency management, and first aid and rescue techniques since she wasn't familiar with the rescue techniques portion. These are the ones I need help catching up on. Ruka said as she placed the textbooks she picked out in front of Izuku. Alright, let's just work through one subject at a time until we get caught up. How about we start with first aid and rescue techniques, since you're already familiar with half of it? Izuku said as he grabbed and opened the textbook for first aid and rescue techniques. They studied together, going over the material before Izuku tested Ruka on it. He walked her through things she didn't quite get until she knew it by heart. They took small breaks here and there so that the study session wouldn't be too overwhelming. Time skip. It had been a couple hours and Ruka was fully caught up in first aid and rescue techniques as well as finished with today's homework. So do you want to start on another subject or do you want to be done for the day? Izuku asked Ruka, who flopped back onto her bed. I think I'll call it a day. Ruka said as Izuku nodded and started to pack up his things. We'll start on the next subject tomorrow. I'll see you later, Izuku said as he headed towards the door. But right as he reached for the door, Ruka called his name. Hey Midoriya. Thanks for helping me study, Ruka said with a faint smile on her face. Izuku smiled back. You're welcome, Ryu. Anytime, Izuku said as he opened the door and exited her room, shutting the door behind him. After he left, the atmosphere changed. It felt lonely. Even though Ruka had lived a fairly solitary life, she had never really felt lonely before. Ruka decided not to dwell on the feeling too much and started playing games on the phone UA provided for her until it was time to get ready for bed. After she got her pajamas on, she got under her covers and just laid there until she fell asleep. Over the next 3 days of school that week, Izuku sat with her at lunchtime and joined her at her dorm room after school to study with her. They studied hard, taking small breaks here and there. Aside from studying, Ruka didn't say much to Izuku, even on lunch break or breaks during their study sessions. He would always try to start conversations, but her replies were brief. But she was slowly warming up to him, becoming a little more talkative with him over the time they spent together. Eventually, they began to share stuff about themselves to each other, things like their pasts, favorite things, and hobbies. By the end of the week on Friday, she was all caught up on everything. Izuku was just about to leave her dorm room after they finished studying together, but stopped in his tracks when he felt a soft tug on his sleeve. He looked back at Ruka. "I just wanted to say, thank you for all you've done for me this week. I really appreciate it," Ruka said in a quiet voice. "Of course, Ryu. I'm happy to help you succeed," Izuku said, smiling brightly at Ruka. "I'm not just talking about helping me catch up on my studies. You were the only one who didn't judge me based on my criminal background. I could see it in your gaze when I first walked into the classroom. You chose to sit next to me during lunch instead of avoiding me and sitting with your friends like everyone else does. Made me feel less alone. Less of an outcast in this school. Thank you," Ruka said as Izuku's smile softened. "All my life, I've never had a true friend. You're my first real friend, Izuku," Ruka said, using his first name for the first time. That was different. She had been calling him Midoriya up until now. Izuku's cheeks burned a bright shade of pink as his heart squeezed when she called him by his first name. He clutched his chest as he made a strange face like he was about to cry. "Is it not okay to call you by your first name? I can continue calling you Midoriya if you want," Ruka said as Izuku shook his head and waved his hands side to side frantically. "No, it's fine. Why, you can call me Izuku." Izuku stuttered as Ruka smiled in amusement, a moment of silence following. "So, does this mean I can call you Ruka?" Izuku asked as Ruka's facial expression softened. "Sure. You can call me Ruka." Ruka granted Izuku permission to refer to her by her first name. He smiled at her and nodded, turning around to leave her dorm room. "Now that I'm all caught up on everything, does that mean you won't be coming over after class anymore?" Ruka asked before Izuku managed to take another step. "I don't know. We'll have to talk to Mr. Aizawa or Principal Nizu about that," Izuku answered as Ruka sighed. "I've actually come to really enjoy your company here after school. It's gonna be quite lonely without you. I'll miss it," Ruka said as Izuku turned his head to look at her. "Yeah, I'll miss it too," Izuku said as he smiled. Then he opened the door and left. As the door shut behind him, that empty feeling surrounded Ruka again. She sat on her bed and brought her knees to her chest. "I wish the rest of the class would try to get to know me like you did, Izuku," Ruka said out loud alone in her room. After the weekend was over, Izuku walked into the classroom a little early like he normally did. But something was different. It was normal for some of his classmates to not be there yet, but the ones that were there were all in a group, ones that didn't normally hang out together in the same group. Jairu, Kirishima, Aoyama, Yaoyorozu, Shoji, Uraraka, Ida, and Sato were all gathering together, whispering among each other. Bakugo was sitting at his desk away from everyone else. When Izuku slid open the door to the classroom, they all turned to see who it was. When they realized it was him, they frowned. Uraraka and Ida seemed especially upset. Was it because he had been sitting with Ruka instead of with them at lunchtime for the past week? "Hey guys. What's going on?" Izuku asked nervously. Ida spoke first. "Midoriya, we've noticed you've been hanging out with that villain girl Ryuto a lot recently," Ida said, confirming Izuku's suspicion that it was because of Ruka. "You also haven't even been walking with me and Ida to the train station after school either," Uraraka pointed out. "Didn't I tell you I was helping Ruka study after school?" Izuku asked Uraraka, who shook her head no. "No, you just apologized and told us you had something important to do and left to go back to the school building," Uraraka said as Izuku realized his mistake. "Oh, sorry. That's my bad then. Anyways, yes, that's what I've been doing. I was helping Ruka study after school per Principal Nizu's orders." Izuku explained the full situation. "The principal's orders?" Ida questioned as Izuku nodded his head. "Then what about lunchtime? Ever since last week Tuesday, you've been ditching us both at lunch and sitting next to Ryu. Was that one of Principal Nizu's orders too?" Uraraka asked Izuku. "Well, no, but I noticed how Ruka's always sitting alone. And since we were going to be study partners, I figured I'd keep her company and get to know her more." Granted, she didn't speak much to me in the beginning. She was kinda distant at first, but I think she's starting to warm up to me a little. We've even shared a bit of information about ourselves to each other. To be honest, Ruka really doesn't seem like a bad person deep down. She was studying really hard to catch up so she can pass the midterms and final exams. I don't believe that a girl who is going to such lengths just to turn her life around could be a bad person at heart. Izuku started going on one of his mumbling rants. Uraraka's expression darkened when she heard him refer to Ruka by her first name instead of her last name Ryu like he used to. It made jealousy fester inside of her. Izuku hadn't even started calling her by her first name Ochako yet, and they've been classmates for roughly a month and a half. And now, after only about a week since Ruka joined their class, he's close enough to her to call her by her first name. God, you're so naive, Deku. Bakugo said loudly. She doesn't truly want to become a hero. She's just trying to avoid a worse outcome. Ida said as Yaoyorozu joined in on the conversation. I agree with Bakugo and Ida. Yaoyorozu said, come on you useless nerd, use your brain. It was either this or Tartarus. Bakugo said. Izuku froze. Ruka did say that last sentence word for word to him the first time they talked. But now, looking back on it, he realized she may have just been saying that to sound more tough. Since then, Ruka had exposed a softer side of her to him and only him. She felt safe enough around Izuku to appear a little more vulnerable to him. He knew about her past. She had told him how she remembered waking up at the Shadow Organization's infirmary when she was 4. She also told him what the police detective told her actually happened based on their records on the case of a murder of a couple and their missing child that shared the same name and looked exactly like her. Ruka went into great detail of all her memories. But she really didn't even need to in order for him to see that she was a victim of unfortunate circumstances, brainwashed of all memories of her life before being forced into a life of crime as an assassin. His classmates didn't know a thing about her, and yet they were judging her based on her criminal history alone, not even considering what led up to it. He was starting to get angry. You don't know her? Izuku blurted out, getting caught up in his emotions at the moment. His classmates looked at him. And how well do you know her, Deku? Uraraka asked as Izuku realized his mistake. He just put himself in the spotlight. Damn it. Why couldn't I just keep my mouth shut? Izuku thought to himself. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Izuku said. He desperately wanted to tell his classmates everything, to make them understand the tragic truth, that Ruka was made an orphan by the same organization that made her into a killer. But he assumed she wouldn't want him telling all his classmates about her past. After all, she trusted him, and spilling everything she's told him so far would betray that trust. He figured if she wanted them to know, she'd tell them herself. Izuku bit his lip, trying his damnedest not to say anything more. The classroom door slid open and the rest of his classmates came in except for Ruka. Small time skip. It was almost time for class and Ruka was usually here by now. True, she was usually the last student to arrive at the classroom, but this was late even for her. Even Mr. Aizawa was there already. It was starting to worry Izuku a bit. Just then, the bell rang to start the school day and Mr. Aizawa sighed. I guess we'll be starting without Ryu, he said. Suddenly, the door to the classroom slid open with a bang, making all the students jump. Oops, my bad. Didn't mean to open it so hard. Anyways, sorry I'm late. All Might said he got distracted by civilians in need, so he was late in escorting me to class. Ruka said, bowing apologetically as Mr. Aizawa face-bombed himself and sighed. All of Class 1A rolled their eyes, except for Izuku. Seriously? That man, I swear. Mr. Aizawa muttered under his breath. Just have a seat. We didn't start anything yet. Mr. Aizawa said as he gestured to her desk, and Ruka walked to her seat and sat down. And with that, homeroom started. Time skip. It was now lunch break and the students started leaving the classroom to go to the cafeteria to eat. Just as Ruka was about to leave, Izuku gently grabbed her sleeve. Hey, would you like to join me and my friends for lunch this time? Izuku asked Ruka with a friendly smile. Are you sure they'll be okay with that? Ruka asked Izuku, whose smile didn't falter, but his right eye twitched ever so slightly, which she noticed. He didn't answer her question directly, but that little twitch of his eye told her his friends probably weren't going to be a fan of the idea of her joining their little circle. "I'm inviting you, so it should be fine. Besides, you'll never get to know your classmates if you don't mingle with them," Izuku said, trying to convince her. He did have a point there. Ruka sighed and reluctantly agreed. "Fine. But the moment they start something is the moment I leave the table," Ruka warned as Izuku's smile widened. "Great. Let's go get lunch together," Izuku said as he and Ruka left the classroom to go to the cafeteria. They both waited in line to get a serving of Lunch Rush's delicious food. The other students still kept their distance from Ruka, leaving a larger space in front of and behind her and Izuku in line. Once they got their food, Izuku led Ruka to the table where Uraraka and Ida were sitting. Ida and Uraraka smiled at Izuku, but as soon as they noticed Ruka behind him, their expressions darkened slightly. It was subtle, they still kept their smiles, but to Ruka it was super obvious they didn't appreciate her presence there. Izuku sat down across from Ida and Ruka sat next to Izuku across from Uraraka. "Finally decided to sit with us again, huh Deku?" Uraraka said in a cheery tone, but Ruka could sense some soreness and aggression in her tone. "I know. It's been a while, sorry," Izuku said as he grinned, scratching the back of his head. "No worries. I understand you were just trying to make Ryu feel more comfortable here," Ida said, seemingly with understanding. Ruka could see right through his act, however. She could see that his body was tense, though she couldn't exactly blame him. She was, after all, a former top assassin with a very high kill count. "DMN. He's good at hiding his disdain for me. A normal person wouldn't be able to detect it, but my training taught me how to read a person's true feelings based on the smallest details of their body language," Ruka thought to herself as she ate. "So Ryu, how did you end up becoming an assassin? I'm kinda curious," Uraraka asked as Ruka paused and studied her face briefly. She could tell that Uraraka was trying to scrutinize her, but was also genuinely curious as well. A few of her classmates nearby overheard Uraraka's question and flocked over. "Yeah, I'm curious to know too," Siro said. "Me too," Kirishima chimed in. Soon all of Class 1A had gathered at the table Ruka was sitting at, eager to hear her story. Even Bakugo and Aoyama were a little curious themselves. She studied all of their facial expressions. They were all just like Uraraka, ready to judge her at any given moment, but also incredibly curious at the same time. Uraraka, I'm not sure that's the best topic to bring up," Izuku said nervously, raising a hand as sweat began to build on his face in little beads here and there. Ruka knew he was just trying to protect her privacy, but she knew that one of her classmates was going to ask this question eventually. And to be honest, they deserved to know the whole truth of her origin story. Ruka gently laid her hand on his, lowering it, which calmed him down a little. Uraraka's eyes narrowed at the physical contact between Ruka's and Izuku's hands and how her touch seemed to ease his nervousness. "No, it's fine Izuku really. I'll tell them. My classmates deserve to know that much," Ruka said as she sighed and began to tell her story. She told them that her earliest memories began when she was 4 years old when she woke up in the Shadow Organization's infirmary in tears for an unknown reason. She told her classmates about the lie mimic and Echo told her about her parents needing to sedate her because she wouldn't cooperate in going to this special training program that she was supposedly specially selected for. She briefed them on her training routines and the punishments that followed if she didn't meet her goals. She told them about her first assassination assignment she took on at 11 years old and how she quickly climbed the ranks to be one of the top assassins in the Shadow Organization. She then explained that sometimes she failed to complete assignments and was harshly disciplined for her failures. "After that brutal beating, I decided I would never fail at completing an assignment again. And I didn't until recently," Ruka said. Then she shared the story of how the heroes set her up to be caught by using All Might as her target. Her classmates gasped when they heard she fought All Might and held her ground against him for a while before ultimately being knocked out by him. Izuku was especially intrigued by her battle with All Might. He was fascinated that she was able to hold her own against the #1 pro hero at all. He had already heard the story once already, but it was the kind of story he could listen to over and over again. Then Ruka went on to elaborate on the real truth the police detective told her about what really happened to her the night before she woke up at the Shadow Organization infirmary. Her parents didn't actually drag her and give her up, they were murdered and she was kidnapped. Then she described her first encounter with Principal Nizu at the police station. You're not the only ones who thought letting someone like me attend UA High was a crazy idea. Even I had my doubts. We're really not so different after all. Ruka finished, crossing her arms over her chest while leaning back in her chair. Class 1A just stared at Ruka, blinking momentarily. Wow, you've really been through a lot, Ryu. Uraraka said, thinking about all Ruka had shared about her life. I see. So you really were just a victim all along, made an orphan and torn away from your home, then forced into life as an assassin. Ida said with a hand cupping his chin. I'm sorry I judged you without hearing your story first. Can you forgive me? Ida then apologized. Then some other classmates started apologizing too. Yeah, me too. My image of you was based off the news reports I saw on TV. I didn't realize you had to kill in order to avoid getting nearly beaten to death. Kaminari said apologetically. One by one, the rest of Class 1A started to apologize to Ruka as well until there was one left to give an apology, Bakugo. The whole class then turned to him and glared at him. What the hell are you guys looking at me for? Bakugo yelled at his classmates. Come on, Bakugo, we all know you were secretly judging her the hardest. Kirishima said, nudging the spiky-haired blonde with his elbow, pissing him off. If I apologize to her, will you guys shut the hell up and get off my butt? Bakugo asked his classmates. They all nodded as he let out a frustrated hiss. Sorry for judging your butt or whatever. Bakugo reluctantly apologized to Ruka. I suppose I can forgive you all. Ruka said. You happy now? Bakugo yelled at his classmates. Some of them snickered at the way he worded his apology, especially Kaminari and Mineta. Their minds were clearly in the gutter. What the F are you laughing at? Bakugo shouted. Wow, Bakugo, I didn't know you were such a perv. Kaminari teased. Yeah, I didn't think you looked at girls like that. Mineta said as Bakugo's face got red in either anger or embarrassment or possibly both. Shut up, Electro Brain, pervy grape, or I'll kill you. Bakugo yelled at his two classmates who straightened up, but then couldn't help but let out a snicker. That's it, you're both dead. Bakugo said as he stood up. Kaminari and Mineta both got up and ran with Bakugo chasing after them, his palms sparking with mini explosions. After the three of them had disappeared out of sight, Ruka's classmates turned their attention back to her. I can't believe you fought All Might and actually held your own against him for a while. That's quite a feat, even though you did ended up getting defeated in the end. Ojiro said, sounding impressed. Well, he is the #1 hero. I wasn't even the #1 assassin in the Shadow Organization. I was only third. Ruka revealed. Third. The remaining of Class 1A raised their voices simultaneously. Was third. I'm putting that life behind me. Assassin life is harsh. It's not for the faint of heart. If you can't do the training, you'll be beaten to near breaking point. If you fail to complete an assignment as desired, you'll also be beaten to near breaking point. They'll fix you up, keep you well fed, physically fit, and up to date on combat techniques, but it's only for you to kill again later. That was the majority of my life. I didn't realize how much I yearned to live a normal teenage life until I arrived here a week ago. Ruka confessed as Izuku smiled. He was happy that Ruka was finally able to open up to her classmates, and happy that his classmates appeared to be a bit more understanding of Ruka and her situation. Suddenly, the bell rang which signaled the end of lunch PRD. Everyone got up from their seats and started to clear their dishes. It was now time for basic hero training. Time skip. Ruka had just been escorted to her room by Mr. Aizawa. Today had been a long day, but it seemed her classmates were finally starting to accept her. She flopped onto her bed back first and let out a long sigh. Suddenly, she heard a knock at her door which startled her. She got up, thinking it was probably Mr. Aizawa forgetting to tell her something important. But when she opened the door, she was surprised to find Izuku standing there. Izuku? What are you doing here? Does Principal Nizu or Mr. Aizawa know you're here? Ruka asked. Izuku shook his head no. Can I come in? Izuku asked permission to enter Ruka's dorm room. Fine. Ruka said as she let him in her dorm room and shut the door. You know I'm all caught up with my studies now, right? Ruka said as Izuku nodded his head. Oh, I know. I just wanted to see you, that's all. Izuku said as he made himself at home and sat on her bed, folding his hands in his lap. Ruka's brows furrowed as she studied his facial expression. It was a habit of hers to analyze people's faces and body language. You came here to ask me something, didn't you? Ruka guessed with pinpoint accuracy. Well, yeah actually. It's about the story you told everyone about your life. Izuku said as Ruka raised an eyebrow. What about it? Ruka asked Izuku, who went on to explain. The version you told me had a lot more details. Particularly when it came to your assignment where you had to hunt down All Might. You told me how the person described him to you so you could find him. And then you mentioned the instant transformation from his skinny form to his muscular form right as you were about to shoot him. You didn't mention his initial description and appearance or his transformation into his iconic form to the class at all. Why did you share those details with me and not the class? Izuku explained and asked Ruka, who sighed. She sat next to him on her bed. Remember when you told me about how you had been training intensely for 10 months with All Might to get ready for the UA high entrance exam? And that you were a late bloomer in manifesting your quirk? Ruka said, leaning in dangerously close to Izuku as his heart and stomach dropped, realizing what she was implying. She had figured it out. How did you find out? Izuku gulped. Clue number 1. It's all a little too convenient, don't you think? That your quirk appeared right before the UA entrance exam started, right after you finished your training with All Might. Clue number 2. Your shoes are slightly bigger where your pinky toes are. Shoes like that are made to accommodate people with extra joints in their pinky toes, in other words quirkless people. Clue number 3. You mentioned when your quirk first appeared, you had trouble controlling it. Usually when quirks first manifest, they're just weak versions of what they can become later on. They don't start out so strong they break your body when used. Clue number 4. When I received that assignment to take down All Might, I wasn't told it was him. And when I saw the man the way he first appeared, I never would have guessed it was him. But then that skinny man transformed into the unmistakable, iconic form of All Might the moment I pulled the trigger. And clue number 5. After the rescue training race, I overheard All Might talking to you about needing to have a word with you concerning him and One for All. That's when it all clicked in my mind, the pieces falling right into place. If I'm correct, All Might's prime days are long gone and his true form these days is that skinny man. He chose you to be his successor because his time as a hero is nearing its end and he can't maintain that muscular form for long PRDS of time anymore. That's why he wanted to speak with you regarding One for All, which must be the name of his quirk that he passed on to you, a quirkless kid. And those 10 months of training was to get your body ready for the intense power of that quirk so you wouldn't die when it was given to you. Ruka explained as Izuku's jaw dropped in shock and amazement. He couldn't believe she figured all this out just from a few observations and bits and pieces of information from his life story. I'm assuming based on your reaction, I'm dead on. Ruka smirked, crossing her arms in front of her chest. Amazing! You would make a great detective based on your observation skills and intellect alone, Ruka. Izuku said, beaming brightly with sparkles in his eyes. But then his tone turned serious. Please don't tell anyone else about this. Izuku said as Ruka laughed. Relax. I didn't tell the class about All Might's 2 forms while telling my life story, did I? Trust me, I know sensitive information when I come across it. As a former assassin, secrecy is one of my specialties. I know what kinds of things should stay secret and I will keep those secrets with me to my grave. You don't have to worry. Ruka said as Izuku sighed with relief. Is that why you told me about All Might's 2 forms and not the class? Because you knew that was sensitive information? Izuku asked Ruka. Well, that, and based on what I had already observed, I figured you already knew about it anyways. But the rest of the class definitely didn't know and doesn't need to know. Ruka said, answered Izuku. You're not mad at me at all, are you, Ruka? You know, for lying to you about my quirk. Izuku asked. No. I see no reason to be. I understand why you would want to keep something like that a secret. Ruka said as Izuku sighed with relief. Phew. I think I can rest easy now. Izuku laughed as he stood up from the bed and started to head towards the door. But before he could leave, Ruka tugged on his sleeve. Hey, when it comes to secrets, assassins and former assassins like myself are the ones that will never break your trust. So if you ever find yourself needing to get something off your chest, but don't want anyone else to hear it, just come find me. I'll keep your secrets safe. Ruka said, winking at Izuku who started to blush slightly. Thanks, Ruka. I'll keep that in mind. Izuku said with a smile as he left her room and snuck quietly out of the dorm building, and since he wasn't supposed to be there. It was the last week of June now and final exams were coming up in a week. Class 1A had already taken their midterms now. Ruka managed to get second in the class. The midterm rankings went as follows. Yaoyorozu Momo, Ryuta Ruka, Ida Tenya, Bakugo Ketsuki, Midoriya Izuku, Todoroki Shoto, Ashutsu, Jarikyoka, Ojiro Mashireo, Mineta Minoru, Shoji Mizo, Kota Koji, Sato Rikido, Yurarko Chogo, Tokoyami Fumikage, Kirishima Ijiro, Toru Hagakure, Shiro Hanta, Ryuma Yuga, Ashido Mina, Kaminari Denki. As Mr. Aizawa wrapped up core classes for the day, he reminded Class 1A that there was only one more week until final exams started, that they should be studying as well as training. He wished them good luck on the way out of the classroom, then shut the door. We've barely taken notes this trimester, Kaminari and Ashido said, starting to freak out. Ashido began laughing nervously as Kaminari said he didn't have time to read the textbooks because he was so focused on the sports festival and internship. It's true we haven't had much free time lately. Tokoyami mentioned. We barely learned anything when we took our midterms, so they didn't seem all that hard. But I'm kinda worried about these. We've been through a lot and they probably won't pull any punches when it comes to testing us. Sato said as Kota nodded in agreement. As someone who ranked in the top 10, I'm not that concerned. Mineta said, looking all confident. Maybe a little too confident. What? You were 10th in the midterms? Kaminari and Ashido yelled simultaneously out of shock. Ah man, and here I thought you were one of us. Ashido said, pointing at Mineta. Don't you know weirdo little creeps like you are only likable if they're kinda stupid? Who's gonna love you now? Kaminari said, clearly frustrated. Everyone. Trust me. Mineta said, keeping his composure. Ashido, Kaminari. We still got time to study. That way we'll all get to go to the training camp together. Right? Izuku said excitedly. Yes. As class rep I have high hopes that will make UA proud. Ida said, raising his hand. It's pretty hard to fail if you just pay attention in class, isn't it? Todoroki said calmly. Why do you gotta cut me down like that? Kaminari said, clutching his chest. Hey, don't worry about it, you two. I can catch you up on the important topics if you want. Yaoyorozu offered as Ashido and Kaminari perked up right away. You're the best, Yaomomo. Ashido and Kaminari said together in unison. I'm afraid I won't be any help when it comes to the practical though. Yaoyorozu said, sulking in her seat. I've been studying, but could you help me out too? I'm having some trouble understanding quadratic functions. Jairu approached Yaoyorozu. Really? Yaoyorozu lifted her head up. Tutor me please. Classical Japanese is killing me. Shiro said, bringing his hands together above his head. Is there room for one more? I'm afraid I'm falling behind a little. Ojiro said with a sheepish grin. Pretty please. The group asked Yaoyorozu, who suddenly got super excited. She started going on about holding a study session at her family's mansion over the weekend. All the energy wafting off of Yaoyorozu caught the attention of Kirishima. Sounds like I should be studying with her. Kirishima said as Bakugo got a sad look on his face. You think I don't know enough? Maybe I should beat the lessons into your skull. Bakugo, who was fourth, said to Kirishima. I'm counting on it. Kirishima replied. Everyone's panicking right now. But it won't do them any good to cram this late in the game. Aoyama said, seeming quite relaxed for someone who scored 19th out of, shouldn't you be more concerned? You didn't do very well in the midterms. Shoji said to Aoyama, who looked at him seeming offended. Are you talking about moi? I did just fine, thank you. Aoyama said. Congrats on getting second in the class, Ruka. You did even better than me. Izuku congratulated Ruka for her midterm ranking, placing a hand on her shoulder. More of Ruka's classmates came over to her and praised her for her midterm ranking. What? No way. Good job, Ryu. Man, I wish I was as smart as you. I was 14th. Uraraka said to Ruka. How did you do it? I want to know your secret. Hagakure said, who was 17th in the rankings. Well, it wasn't easy. I had to catch up on my studies since I missed a fair amount of material because I wasn't a student at UA from the beginning of the trimester. But Izuku helped me get up to speed on things. Ruka explained as best as she could. There's no way that useless nerd Deku helped out that much. He did worse than you. Bakugo scoffed. That's not true. While he did score lower than me in the midterms, he really helped me out in catching up in my studies since he had already learned the material that I wasn't here for. Ruka said, defending Izuku. Ruka is actually very smart. She's extremely perceptive and is excellent at problem solving. She picks things up a lot faster than I do, so it's a no-brainer that she surpassed me. Izuku said with a sheepish grin on his face, scratching his cheek with one finger. Just then the bell rang for lunch and everyone headed to the cafeteria. On the way there, Izuku walked alongside Ruka. So what are your plans for finals, Izuku? Ruka asked Izuku, who didn't miss a beat. Actually, I was gonna ask Principal Nizu if I could get permission to study with you after school and over the weekend. You did rank second in our class after all. I feel like now you can tutor me. I only got 5th. Izuku said with a chuckle as Ruka's expression brightened. That'd be nice. Maybe we could train together too. Perhaps we could get Principal Nizu's permission to have my quirk-canceling cuffs removed for training. Ruka said, adding a suggestion. That's a great idea. I love it. Izuku said as he and Ruka reached the cafeteria together. Today they sat with Ida, Todoroki, Uraraka, Azui, Hagakure. Ever since Ruka shared her life story with Class 1A, they had been more accepting of her and she finally felt comfortable among her classmates. She would join them for lunch and interact with them more often. But she was closest to Izuku since he was her first friend. While they ate, Izuku expressed his concern on the practical exam. He wasn't too worried about the written portion since that would cover things learned in core classes, but the practical exam was a different story since he didn't know what to expect. We can't just study, we have to stay in great physical shape. Izuku said. Then Monoma from Class 1B bumped him on the head with his elbow, seemingly on purpose. Oh sorry, your head's so big that it's hard to miss. Monoma apologized mockingly as Ruka growled. You're from Class 1B, Monoma, right? That really hurt. Izuku said as Monoma continued on, completely ignoring him. I heard you guys stumbled across the hero killer. Just like in the sports festival, Class 1A isn't happy unless they're the center of attention. But you do realize you're not in the spotlight because people think you're good heroes, right? It's just that you keep getting into so much trouble. Here's food for thought. Someday the rest of us might get caught up in your mess. And then we'll all become unwitting victims as well. What kind of horrible villains will you bring upon us? Oh wait, your new classmate is one. Look at that, you've already succeeded in bringing a villain into this SCO dash. Monoma was cut off when he fell unconscious due to his classmate Kendo smacking him on the head. Thank goodness. Ruka was about to lose her patience. That guy was unbearable. That's not funny, Monoma. Chill out. Kendo said to Monoma, who was out cold. I apologize for him. I'm pretty sure there's a hole where his heart should be. So I was listening. I know you're all worried about what's gonna be on the big final practical. I heard it was gonna be combat against robots like the entrance exam. Kendo said. Really? How do you know that? Izuku asked Kendo. One of my friends who's a few grades up filled me in. You know, cheating. But oh well. Kendo said as Izuku started going on one of his mumbling rants. What kind of idiot are you, Kendo? You just gave away our whole strategic advantage. This was our chance to finally pull ahead of that class full of idiots. Monoma managed to say before being knocked out again by Kendo. They're not the idiots. Kendo raised her voice at Monoma, implying that he was the idiot. She walked away, dragging the unconscious Minoma with her. Time skip. Back in the classroom at the end of the day, Izuku and the others told the rest of the class that the practical exam was going to involve fighting robots. Ashido and Kaminari were relieved since they didn't have to worry about quirk control with robots. Bakugo started to get annoyed and yelled at them to learn how to control their quirks. Then he turned to Izuku and told him that the new way he was using his power was starting to piss him off. He said that they would be getting new rankings showing exactly where they stand and that he would show Izuku how much better he was than him. And with that, he left the classroom and slammed the door shut. Shortly after, the rest of Class 1A started leaving the classroom to go home except for Izuku and Ruka. Mr. Aizawa came back to escort Ruka to the dorm building. "Hey Mr. Aizawa? Izuku and I were talking about how we were going to prepare for finals and we came up with a couple ideas. But we would need Principal Nizu's permission. Could you escort me and Izuku to his office first?" Ruka asked their homeroom teacher. Mr. Aizawa looked at Ruka, then at Izuku, who both looked at him with anticipation. He sighed and gave his answer. "I suppose I could allow a little detour, considering it's about finals preparation," Mr. Aizawa said. Ruka and Izuku thanked him and the three of them headed over to the principal's office. They got there. Mr. Aizawa knocked on the principal office door. "Come in." Principal Nizu's voice sounded through the door. Mr. Aizawa opened the door and Ruka and Izuku stepped inside. "So what brings you in today?" Principal Nizu asked the two students. Izuku started first. "Sir, I was wondering if I could have permission to study with Ruka after school this week and over the weekend as well." Izuku brought up his request. Principal Nizu folded his paws together on his desk. "I don't see why not. It seemed to work well last time you two studied together." Principal Nizu granted Izuku his permission to study with Ruka outside of class. "Is there anything else you would like to discuss?" Principal Nizu asked as Izuku looked at Ruka and nodded. "Well, actually there is, sir. I want to train for the finals, but the cuffs I wear don't allow me to utilize my quirk's abilities. I haven't been able to train my quirk at all outside of class, and I want to be as prepared as possible when taking the final practical exam. I understand that I'm required to wear them when I'm not in class, but..." Ruka said but ended up faltering. "So, you're asking to have the quirk-canceling cuffs removed in order to train, is that correct?" Principal Nizu asked Ruka, who nodded slowly. "Very well then. I suppose I can allow that. In fact, I'll do you one better. I will talk to the Hero Public Safety Commission and convince them that you don't need to wear them on campus anymore. Based on the reports Mr. Aizawa and the other teachers have given me about you, it seems as though you've been doing very well during your time here. There's been no incidents, so I don't really see the need for you to keep wearing them here." Principal Nizu said as Ruka's face lit up. "Really? Thank you so much, Principal Nizu," Ruka said happily. "You will still be escorted by a staff member between classes and to and from the dorm building like we have been doing." Principal Nizu added. "Of course, I understand, sir," Ruka said, acknowledging the conditions. She didn't mind that she had to be escorted everywhere, she was just happy she wouldn't have to wear the cuffs. Then Principal Nizu spoke again. "However, during the summer training camp, you'll be required to wear the cuffs while not actively training there since it's off campus. Do you understand?" Principal Nizu said. "Yes, sir," Ruka said, nodding her head. She was a little bummed out about that, but she would take what she could get at this point. "Is there anything else you wish to discuss with me?" Principal Nizu asked as Ruka and Izuku both shook their heads no. "We'd also like to use some of the school's facilities for training on the weekend too, if that's all right," Ruka said shyly. "I suppose I can allow that as well. I can have a staff member supervise you while you train. Is there anything else you would like to discuss?" Principal Nizu asked. "No, sir, that's all. Thank you so much for your time," Ruka and Izuku said together as they bowed politely and started to make their leave with Mr. Aizawa following them, shutting the door behind them. Time skip. The next day, Mr. Aizawa arrived at Ruka's dorm room to escort her to class. She opened the door, all ready for class. Principal Nizu managed to convince the Hero Public Safety Commission to allow you to be free of the quirk-canceling cuffs while on campus. Hold out your wrists. Mr. Izawa said as he took out a key, and Ruka did as he said. He unlocked her cuffs one by one and put them in a pocket of his jacket. Principal Nizu had a pretty hard time convincing them. He went out of his way just for you. So you better be grateful. Mr. Izawa said as Ruka rubbed her wrists where the cuffs were. It was a relieving feeling. Of course. Ruka said as she and Mr. Izawa started walking to the school building. Class started when they arrived at the classroom. The school day went by in a flash, and Izuku accompanied Ruka to her dorm room, escorted by Mr. Izawa. They studied together, making sure there wasn't a single piece of information they didn't understand. Every day after school they did this, and before they knew it, it was the weekend. It was early Sunday morning, and Izuku was super excited for today. He and Ruka were going to study and train together. They were given permission by the principal himself to use the school facilities to train over the weekend under the supervision of a staff member, of course. But first they were going to study for the written portion of the exam at her dorm room. He got dressed, putting on a teal athletic short sleeve and navy blue workout shorts and a black track jacket on top. He packed a small duffel bag with a plain white t-shirt and jeans, a sweat towel, and a water bottle. Then he grabbed his yellow backpack and headed out the door to the train station where he took the train to UA High. Ruka was still asleep in her bed when she heard a knock on her door. Her eyes fluttered open and she grabbed her phone to check the time. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. What the dash, Ruka said, wondering who was at her door at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. She groggily got out of bed and went to go answer the door, still in her pajamas. She was surprised to see Izuku standing there with a huge smile on his face. What Izuku? I thought you were going to be here later, like in the afternoon. Ruka said sleepily. I was so excited for today, I just couldn't wait. Sorry if I woke you up. Izuku said, grinning sheepishly as he scratched the back of his head. Just give me a moment. I need to wake up more and get ready. Ruka said as she yawned and stretched her arms behind her before closing the door so she could get dressed. Izuku was left blushing at her doorstep. He had noticed her melons poke out in the fabric as her shirt was pulled tighter against her chest when she had stretched since she wasn't wearing a bra. Realizing where his mind was going, he shook his head to clear it. Get yourself together, Izuku. Don't focus on that. You're here to study and train, nothing else. Izuku said to himself mentally as he slapped his hands against his cheeks a couple times. Ruka opened the door again. She was wearing a white wide V-neck short-sleeve t-shirt and skinny jeans, both hugging her figure. Izuku's heart squeezed when he saw her, but he kept his composure. I haven't seen you in casual clothes before. You look nice. Izuku said as Ruka smiled and chuckled a little. It's just a plain white shirt and skinny jeans, nothing special. Now come in and let's get studying. Ruka said. Yes, ma'am. Izuku said as he entered her dorm room. They both sat down on her bed and Izuku pulled out his Foundational Hero Studies textbook and their study session began. As they studied together, Izuku couldn't help but glance at Ruka every now and then. She was really pretty, the way her wavy azure blue hair fell loosely down her shoulders and back, the way her deep crimson eyes honed in on whatever she was focused on, the way her two-ribbed black dragon horns reflected the light, how flawless her pale complexion was, and her curves. They were perfect. She wasn't the curviest girl in the class, but that didn't matter to Izuku. After a few hours of studying every subject, they took a small break. So, do you want to just go ahead and start training after this? Or do you want to go over the material a little more then go train? Ruka asked Izuku. I think I'm good on everything right now. We went over every subject. Besides, I really want to see your quirk in action. I've been taking notes on all our classmates and their quirks, but I haven't gathered as much information on you as I have for them. Izuku said as Ruka laughed. You're a diligent one, huh? Can't say I blame you though. You needed to be, considering you were quirkless for most of your life. Ruka said as Izuku's gaze fell to his lap. Yeah, it's the only reason I was able to stand a chance against Kaken during our first combat training. I still hadn't really gotten a hang of controlling my quirk yet at that point. So relying on my observations was my only advantage against him. He's amazing after all. His combat abilities are top-notch, not to mention he has a powerful quirk. Izuku said, reminiscing on the time he and Uraraka were teamed up as heroes against Bakugo and Ida, who were supposed to be villains. Bakugo is strong, yes, but he's got a serious attitude problem. Doesn't seem very heroic to me. He makes me seem like a nice person and I was an actual villain. Ruka said with a small laugh as Izuku turned to her. You are a nice person, Ruka. Sure, you weren't the friendliest at first, but you were never mean. And since you've warmed up to me and the rest of the class, you're a real pleasure to be around. Like I said before, I never believed you were a bad person at heart. Izuku said as Ruka looked at him. I suppose you were right. Ruka said with a soft smile as Izuku smiled back. Anyways, I need to get dressed into some more appropriate clothes for training. I was thinking we could use the gym first and start with some workouts, then head to ground beta to train our quirks. Principal Nizu said that we could wear our hero costumes and use some of the robots for combat training as well. Ruka said as she went to her dresser to find some workout clothes. Do you want me to leave the room while you change? Izuku asked Ruka, who was rummaging through her dresser drawers. Nah, you can stay but don't look. Ruka said as Izuku nodded and turned around to give her privacy. She started undressing and put her workout clothes on. She put the clothes she was wearing into a drawstring bag to bring with her. Once she was done, she let Izuku know. She was wearing a teal sports bra top, navy blue leggings, white ankle socks, and crimson sneakers that matched her eyes. Hey, we match, Izuku said, taking off his black track jacket and gesturing to his teal short-sleeve t-shirt, navy blue shorts, white socks, and red shoes. Did you do that on purpose? Izuku said with a playful smirk. No. The rest of my workout clothes just happened to be dirty. Ruka said, folding her arms across her chest, shifting her weight to one leg. She actually was telling the truth and she was willing to prove it without shame. If you don't believe me, look in my dresser drawers and my dirty laundry basket. Ruka said with a teasing smirk. Izuku's face heated up from the thought of going through her drawers and laundry basket. And no, I'll believe you, Izuku said as Ruka just laughed. I'll let Principal Nizu know we're ready to start training. Ruka said as she grabbed her phone and dialed the number to the principal's office and put it to her ear. Hi, Principal Nizu. This is Ryu to Ruka. Me and Izuku are ready to start training. Could you send over someone to escort and supervise us? Thank you, Ruka said as she hung up the phone. Shortly after, Mr. Aizawa knocked on her door and the three of them headed to the gym first to do some workouts. While they worked out, Izuku couldn't help but notice how physically fit Ruka was. She didn't have bulging muscles or abs, but she was lean and decently muscular. Ruka had the kind of physique that hid her true strength. She was extremely strong for her size. He couldn't believe how much weight she could lift at each machine. She must have trained like crazy during her time as an assassin at the Shadow Organization. Midoriya, stop gawking and pay attention to your own workouts. Mr. Aizawa's voice snapped Izuku out of his trance. Yes, sir. Sorry, Izuku said as he started focusing on his own routine. Ruka giggled at him getting called out. Once they were done working out, Mr. Aizawa brought them their hero costumes and escorted them to the locker rooms where they changed. Then the three of them went to the center of ground beta where there were robots waiting for them. We're going to focus on one of you at a time. Ruka, you're up first, Mr. Aizawa said as he and Izuku then went to a building a ways away to monitor the fight from afar. Mr. Aizawa then activated the robots remotely. Dragon Soul, physical enhancement, Ruka said as her body briefly glowed a blue energy. A 1-point robot came at her, Ruka's eyes flashed to it and she jumped as it attacked. She landed on it hard, slamming it into the ground. Then a 2-point robot came up behind her. She immediately turned her head and caught it by one of the limbs and yanked, pulling it over her head and slamming it down in front of her. A normal person wouldn't be able to lift it, but with her physical enhancement granted by the dragon spirit, she did it with ease. Then came a 3-point robot. Dragon Soul, partial transformation, Ruka said as her arms and legs grew blue scales and her fingernails and toenails turned into claws, becoming dragon-like. The fabric of her hero costume stretching and conforming to her form. She punched the 3-point robot countless times with incredible speed, her scales protecting her knuckles from damage. Then she roundhouse kicked the robot with her dragon leg, sending it back a ways, crashing into a building. The red lights faded as the robot went out of commission. More 1-point and 2-point robots surrounded Ruka. She then called forth the dragon spirit. Dragon soul, spirit summon. Ruka shouted as a huge blue spectral dragon with red glowing eyes emerged from her chest and proceeded to attack the numerous robots around her, quickly wiping them out with its crushing jaws and swipes of its claws and tail. Izuku had never seen her use the dragon spirit before, so he watched intently with fascination as the army of robots was obliterated. Then a massive 0-point robot showed up. The spectral dragon locked its glowing red eyes on it and barreled into the huge robot, the impact pushing it back a bit. But then the robot kept moving forward, pushing the dragon spirit back, the spectral dragon groaning as it struggled. Ruka called the dragon spirit back to her. Okay, time to get serious. Dragon soul, full transformation. Ruka said as she transformed into her full dragon form, growing and shifting into a huge blue dragon with black horns and glowing crimson eyes and massive blue webbed wings. Izuku stared in awe at the transformation. He hadn't seen her use this part of her quirk yet either. Ruka then charged at the 0-point robot, ramming it with even more force than the dragon spirit. The 0-point robot left giant skid marks in the pavement of the mock city street. She then clawed at the robot, easily tearing through the metal. She also bit large chunks off of the frame. The robot, although heavily battered, aimed its sights at Ruka. She jumped back, opened her mouth and breathed in, her chest inflating and starting to glow orange between the scales. Then she exhaled as a huge cone of fire surged out of her mouth, engulfing the robot in the inferno. The heat was so intense, Izuku and Mr. Aizawa could feel it even though they were inside a building a ways away. When the fire subsided, all that was left of the robot was a huge pool of molten metal in a charred crater. There was heavy heat damage to the buildings around the area where the 0-point robot was, but other than that, the damage to the rest of the area was minimal. Izuku just stared in shock at the scene. The buzzer sounded and Ruka transformed back into her base human form. She inspected her hero costume, finding no damage to it, which surprised her. The fabric, whatever it was extremely durable and flexible. It was better than anything she had access to at the Shadow Organization. That was incredible, Ruka, Izuku said as he ran to her with Mr. Aizawa following behind. You managed to defeat all the robots I put against you utilizing different aspects of your quirk. Though you probably could have dealt a little less collateral damage by defeating the 0-point robot a different way. But all in all, you did well. Good work, Ryu. Mr. Aizawa critiqued Ruka's training. Midoriya, you're up, Mr. Aizawa said as he and Ruka went to another building to watch the fight from. Then he activated the robots. Izuku defeated the 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point robots with relative ease by activating one for all, full cowl 8%. He zipped from robot to robot, delivering powerful punches as sparkling red veins coursed throughout his body accompanied by teal lightning crackling around him. When the 0-point robot made its appearance, he crouched down and jumped, launching himself in the air and punching the robot head-on with one for all surging through his arm. The impact made the robot fall onto its back, unable to get back up. Unlike the entrance exam, his bones didn't break. He really had improved a lot since he started at UA High. When Izuku landed, the buzzer sounded and he deactivated one for all. Ruka and Mr. Aizawa joined up with Izuku. You defeated all the robots without breaking a single bone. You're improving a lot, Midoriya. I'm impressed. Keep up the good work, Mr. Aizawa said as Izuku nodded. That was impressive, especially when you jumped and punched that 0-point robot onto its back, Ruka said as Izuku smiled. I actually did the same thing at the entrance exam, except I broke both my legs and right arm in the process because I wasn't used to my power yet, Izuku said, scratching his cheek with one finger. I'm envious of our classmates, Ruka said as Izuku looked at her with a puzzled expression. They were here from the start of the year with you. They got to see how much you've improved. And here I am, arriving late in the game, Ruka said as Izuku let out a soft chuckle. There's still lots of room for improvement, Ruka. For both of us, so let's get stronger together. Izuku said as he held out his hand to Ruka, who smiled and clapped her hand with his and shook it firmly. Deal. Ruka said as Mr. Aizawa yawned, catching both hers and Izuku's attentions. If we're done here, then let's get going. Mr. Aizawa said as Ruka and Izuku nodded. Right, sorry. Ruka and Izuku said as the three of them headed back to the locker rooms where they changed out of their hero costumes, showered, and changed into their clothes. When they left the locker rooms, Izuku chuckled. We match again. Izuku said as he pointed to his outfit, which now consisted of a white t-shirt and jeans. Ruka was wearing the white wide V-neck short sleeve and skinny jeans from earlier. She just rolled her eyes as Mr. Aizawa escorted them back to Ruka's dorm room where the rest of Izuku's stuff was. Izuku finished packing up his school materials in his backpack and put it on his back. Then he put his black track jacket in his duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder. I had fun today, Ruka. It may have been for exam preparation, but I had a good time with you. We should go and hang out for real sometime. Izuku said as Ruka raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me out on a date? Ruka teased as Izuku's face burned a bright red. What? And no, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, I'm not asking you out because I want to be your b-boyfriend or anything. I meant just as a friend, that's all. Izuku said, all panicky and flustered, waving his hands around frantically. An amused smile spread across Ruka's lips. She approached him and planted a soft kiss on his forehead, which made him freeze out of shock. I'd love to, Izuku. But we'll probably need Principal Nizu's permission again. If he does approve, I'll still probably have to wear those quirk-canceling cuffs again, and we may need to be chaperoned. Ruka said as Izuku broke out of his dumbfounded state. Oh yeah, you're probably right. Izuku said, coming to the realization. That's right, the hero. Public Safety Commission still viewed her as a dangerous villain. It made Izuku kind of upset on her behalf. How much more did Ruka need to do to prove herself to them? You almost done in there? I'd like to go home. Mr. Aizawa said from outside of Ruka's door. Sorry, Mr. Aizawa, I'll be right out. Guess that's my cue to leave. See you tomorrow at school. Izuku said as he smiled at Ruka, who smiled back. Bye, Izuku. See you tomorrow. Ruka said as she opened the door for him and he left. She could hear their footsteps getting farther and farther away. Oh, Izuku. Ruka said as she flopped down on her bed, staring up at the ceiling. She thought about what he said after she asked him if he was asking her out on a date. He said he wasn't asking her out because he wanted to be her boyfriend, but based on how flustered he was, she knew he wouldn't be opposed to it. Hell, he might even secretly want to be her boyfriend. She chuckled at the thought of him confessing his feelings to her, all nervous and flustered. Her heart felt warm as the scene played in her head over and over. Eventually she grew tired and fell asleep, dreaming about Izuku. It was Monday, July 1st, and it was the first day of final written exams. Ruka and Izuku and the rest of the class had done all they could to prepare for them. Mr. Aizawa and Class 1A were waiting for Ruka. The bell hadn't rung yet, so she wasn't technically late. Just then, Ruka slid open the classroom door. All Might was the one dropping her off this time since Mr. Aizawa had to be in the classroom early to prepare the classroom for final exams. All Might leaned down to Ruka at eye level and cupped his hand to her ear. Good luck, young Ryu. I have faith that you'll pass with flying colors. All Might said as Ruka smiled. Thanks, All Might. Ruka said, then continued walking to her seat and sat down. There was an All Might themed twist eraser mechanical pencil that had I am here stamped on the side, eraser and pencil lead refills, and the written exam packet for language arts, classical Japanese, flipped over backwards on her desk. Ruka smiled at the All Might pencil and refills on her desk. They were definitely from Izuku. Students were required to bring their own writing utensils to the exam. Ruka had brought hers, but it was a standard number 2 pencil with a small eraser that would eventually need sharpening. She came prepared with a sharpener and an extra eraser, but a mechanical pencil with an eraser she could extend by twisting it would be much more convenient. Plus, Izuku even thought about the possibility of wearing down the eraser or running out of pencil lead and provided her with refills. Ah, he's so thoughtful and sweet. Ruka thought to herself as she glanced back at Izuku briefly, who noticed and smiled widely back. Okay, class, When I say, you may turn over your packets and start the exam. Mr. Izawa said as everyone picked up their pencils and placed their fingers on the edge of the papers, ready to flip them over. You may start. Mr. Izawa said as the classroom filled with the sound of packets being flipped over and scratching of pencil on paper. A couple hours later, there was a break PRD of 15 minutes for the students to put down their pencils and rest. After break was over, Mr. Izawa signaled the start of the rest of the exam. Ruka finished her exam a bit early along with Yaoyorozu. She sat back in her chair with her arms behind her head until Mr. Izawa announced that time was up. All right, put your pencils down. Last person in each row, pass your answer sheets to me. Mr. Izawa said as the class did as he said. Ruka was the only one in her row, or rather single desk at the front middle of the classroom between rows, so she just got up and handed Mr. Izawa her exam packet. Because it was finals week, most of the days were going to be short. Just exams in the morning, then the rest of the day off, with the exception of tomorrow. Tuesday's schedule would consist of the math exam in the morning, lunch, then the science exam in the afternoon. Wednesday's exam was going to be foreign languages, English, Thursday's exam was going to be history social studies, and Friday was the final practical exam. Ruka approached Izuku with the all-might pencil in hand. Thanks for this. It's a lot better than my standard OL number 2 pencil. Ruka thanked Izuku, twirling the all-might pencil all around over her fingers with practiced ease. Oh, you're welcome, Ruka. I noticed all the pencils you had were those standard ones, so I figured you could use an upgrade. Even if it may be a bit dorky. Izuku said, grinning sheepishly as Ruka laughed. You know, you're fairly perceptive yourself, Izuku. But you overthink things sometimes, going off on little mumbling rants. Ruka pointed out as Izuku blushed from embarrassment. Oh, sorry. Izuku apologized. It's not exactly a bad thing. You're just analyzing things out loud. It's just how you process information. Plus, I think it's kind of adorable. Ruka said as Izuku blushed slightly. Really? Most people think it's annoying or creepy. Izuku said as Ruka rolled her eyes in a playful manner. They just don't understand your thought process. Ruka said as she clapped her hand on Izuku's shoulder. You're the only one that said something like that to me. Izuku said with a soft smile. Ruka smiled back and lightly squeezed his shoulder. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, Izuku. Ruka said as Izuku nodded. Yeah, see you, Ruka. Izuku responded in kind of a trance. She slid her hand off of his shoulder and left the classroom with Mr. Izawa following behind her. Izuku stared in the direction that Ruka disappeared, autonomously putting his hand on his shoulder where her hand was. He then shook his head and left the classroom to go home for the day. Time skip. It was now Friday, July 5th, and it was the biggest day of finals week, practical exam day. Class 1A was dressed in their hero costumes, gathered in front of one of the training grounds. There were several UA teachers gathered behind Mr. Izawa. Ruka had a feeling the practical test wasn't going to be against robots. Otherwise, Principal Nizu wouldn't have allowed her and Izuku to fight them over the weekend. Now then, let's begin the last test. Remember, it's possible to fail this final. If you want to go to camp, then don't make any stupid mistakes. Mr. Izawa said as Jairu raised her hand. Why are all the teachers here? Jairu asked. I expect many of you have gathered information and believe you have some idea of what you'll be faced with. Today, Mr. Izawa said as Kaminari didn't miss a beat. We're fightin' those big ol' metal robots. Kaminari said excitedly. Fireworks, here we come. Ashido said, pumping her fist with excitement. Suddenly, Mr. Izawa's scarf started to move on its own. This year's tests will be completely different for various reasons. Principal Nizu said, popping out of Mr. Izawa's scarf. Principal Nizu? Several of Ruka's classmates said simultaneously in surprise. You're changing things? Yaoyorozu said, sounding concerned. The tests now have a new focus. There will be hero work, of course, but also teamwork and combat against actual people. So what does that mean for you? You students will be working in pairs and your opponents will be one of our esteemed UA teachers. Isn't that fabulous? Principal Nizu announced as everyone got uneasy looks on their faces. Fighting the teachers, Uraraka said in a worried tone. Additionally, your partners and your opponents have already been chosen. They were determined at my discretion based on various factors including fighting styles, grades, and interpersonal relationships. First, Yaoyorozu and Todoroki are a team. Against me. Then we have Midoriya paired with Bakugo and V. And their opponent is. Mr. Aizawa said as if right on cue. All Might came down from the sky and landed on his feet with a heavy thud. I am here to fight. All Might said. We're up against All Might? Izuku and Bakugo said in unison, seeming very concerned. Ruka didn't really say anything. She was concerned, but not as much as Izuku and Bakugo because she had fought All Might seriously before. Granted she lost, but at least she had experience fighting him. You're gonna have to work together. If you want to win. All Might said, probably mainly referring to the boys since they had a strained interpersonal relationship from years of Bakugo bullying Izuku. And now, let's announce the teams and who they'll be fighting in order. Principal Nizu said as he listed the pairings and their opponents. First it was Kirishima and Sato versus Cementos, then Azui and Tokoyami versus Ectoplasm, then Ida and Ojiro versus Power Loader, then Yaoyorozu and Todoroki versus Mr. Aizawa, then Uraraka and Aoyama versus 13, then Ishido and Kaminari versus Principal Nizu, then Jairu and Koda versus Present Mike, then Hagakure and Shoji versus Snipe, then Siro and Mineta versus Midnight, and finally Ruka, Izuku, and Bakugo versus All Might. To complete the exam, you'll have 30 minutes. In order to win, your objective is to put these HNDCFFS on your teacher, or you can win if one of you manages to escape the combat stage. Principal Nizu explained the conditions of the exam. So we either have to capture the teacher or run away. It's basically like the combat training. Kaminari said, cupping his chin in his hand. Yeah, but is it really okay to just jet? Ishido asked. Yep. Principal Nizu answered Ishido with a thumbs up. It's gonna be much different than that combat training y'all went through earlier. After all, you up against people who are way better than you. Present Mike said. Better? Really? Wait, aren't you just the announcer? Jairu said as Koda quietly gestured for her to pipe down. Hey, watch your mouth, girl. Have some respect. Present Mike yelled at Jairu. This time your exam will be very similar to a real battle. As strange as it is, please think of us as villains. 13 told the students. As soon as you come across your enemy, if you think you can win against them, then fight. However, Snipe started to say, in instances where you're outmatched, it would be smarter to run away and find help. Todoroki, Ida, Midoriya, Lee. I'm sure the four of you understand. Mr. Aizawa said, referring to the three boys for their encounter with the hero killer Stain, and Ruka because of her experience as an assassin. There were times when she had to abandon her assignments because she was outmatched, but the Shadow Organization didn't care. They still punished her severely. I won't make that mistake again. I will pass this test and prove that I'm a hero. Ida said, clenching his fist in determination. Same. I'll prove that I am hero material, despite what others may think of me based on my past. Ruka said, a fierce glint of determination flashed in her eyes. Izuku smiled at her, proud of her resolve. So we fight to win or run to win? Izuku said, turning his attention forward. That's right. It's a test of your decision-making skills. But with these rules, you're probably thinking your only real choice is to flee. That's why the support course made these super clever accessories for us. All Might said, pulling out special cuffs from a hidden pocket in his hero costume. Behold! Ultra compressed weights. Present Mike said with enthusiasm. These babies will add about half our body weight to our physiques. It's not much, but they will eat up our stamina and make it harder for us to move around. Oh shoot! These are heavier than I thought. All Might said as he finished fastening the last cuff onto his left wrist. We had a contest just to come up with these designs and young Hatsum ended up winning it. All Might said. Wow, good for Hatsum. Izuku said as Bakugo's frown darkened. You think we need a handicap to win against you? Think again. Bakugo said, irritated and overconfident as always. Ha! This'll be fun. All Might laughed his hearty laugh as his expression darkened. Let's begin. The teams will take the practical exam in the order you were called. We have a stage prepared for you. Sato, Kirishima, you're up. Mr. Izawa said. Yes, sir. Kirishima and Sato said together. Those waiting their turn to fight can either watch the exams or try to strategize together as a team. It's your choice. That's all. Mr. Izawa said as he and the other teachers started heading to their designated stages. Most of the teams decided to go and try coming up with strategies to pass the exam. Ruka, Izuku, and Uraraka decided to watch the exam since Bakugo wasn't willing to talk strategies with Izuku and Ruka, and Aoyama was too preoccupied with himself to pay any attention to Uraraka. Plus, Izuku wanted to see his classmates fight against the teachers. As they watched the first battle, Ruka and Izuku realized that Mr. Izawa put everyone against teachers that they'd have a hard time against. They would have to realize their weaknesses and think about their compatibility with the teacher they were up against in order to win. Recover Girl confirmed their observation. Kirishima and Sato ended up failing the practical. Time skip. Everyone had taken their practical exams except for Izuku, Bakugo, and Ruka. The results were as follows. Kirishima Ijiro and Sato Rikido vs. Cementos failed. Azuitiu and Tokoimi Fumikage vs. Ectoplasm passed. Ida Tenya and Ojiro Mashireo vs. Power Loader passed. Yayarozu Momo and Todoroki Shoto vs. Mr. Izawa passed. Uraraka Ochako and Aoyama Yuga vs. 13th passed. Then Ashido Mina and Kaminari Denki vs. Principal Nizu failed. Jairu Kyoka and Koda Koji vs. Present Mike passed. Hagakure Toru and Shoji Mizo vs. Snipe passed. Siro Hanta and Mineta Minoru vs. Midnight passed. The giant doors to ground beta closed behind Izuku, Bakugo, and Ruka. The buzzer sounded and the exam began. Bakugo started speed walking away from Izuku, who tried to reason with him, saying that their best chance at winning was to try and escape instead of fighting All Might head-on. But Bakugo was intent on fighting the #1 hero and defeating him. Despite getting nowhere with Bakugo, Izuku still tried to reason with him. Bakugo was starting to get extremely set off and punched Izuku in the face. Ruka rushed to Izuku's side. Izuku, are you okay? Ruka said, genuinely concerned. Yeah, I'm fine. That really hurt. Izuku said as he covered his nose with his hand. Ruka then flashed Bakugo a death glare which made him freeze out of fear for a moment. If looks could kill, her icy stare would have killed Bakugo 1,000,000 times over. Listen to me, Bakugo. I don't exactly know what went on between you and Izuku in the past, but you need to shove those issues aside and work together with both of us to figure out how to pass the exam. Now listen. If anyone should fight him, it should be me. I'm the only one of us that has fought All Might seriously before. I can hold him off for a bit while you and Izuku dash for the escape gate. Ruka raised her voice at Bakugo, who just got even more irritated. Shut up, Ryu. I don't take orders from some demon villain who's pretending to become a hero. Bakugo shouted back at her as Izuku was starting to get upset with him for calling Ruka a villain. Catch on. Apologize to Ruka right now. Izuku yelled angrily. Shut up, you useless nerd. I'm not apologizing to anybody. Especially not to that villain dash, Bakugo started to say until he noticed the menacing blue aura starting to emanate from Ruka. You effing little sheet. Look at you. Your attitude is worse than anyone I've ever met. And I came from a world of villains. Now if you want to call me a villain, fine. But just know you're much worse than me. So what would that make you, huh? Ruka said as she stared daggers at Bakugo. The F, did you say to me? Bakugo yelled back at Ruka, a fiery aura of his own fuming off of him. Ruka and Bakugo started bickering back and forth. Izuku started to get nervous as the atmosphere around them grew more and more intense between them. Guys? We really shouldn't be arguing at a time like this. Izuku said right as an extremely strong burst of air tore through the street, completely throwing the three of them back and tearing the pavement off of the road. When the dust cleared, All Might was seen walking intimidatingly in their direction. Ruka immediately turned her attention to All Might. If you think of this as an exam and not a real fight, you'll be sorry. I'm a villain now, heroes. Remember that. You better come at me with everything you've got. I won't pull my punches. All Might said with a villainous smile on his face. It's over if we fight him head-on, let's run. Izuku said as he started to take off. Don't tell me what to do. Bakugo yelled at Izuku. How about a stun grenade? You want everything I've got, All Might? Like that wasn't my plan. I never hold back. Damn it. Bakugo yelled as his face was grabbed by All Might's massive hand. He didn't hesitate to blast All Might with his explosions, which didn't seem to damage him in the slightest. Then he proceeded to slam Bakugo into the ground forcefully, making him cough. Then All Might's attention turned to Izuku, who activated One for All and jumped backwards. Ruka saw that Izuku was going to collide with Bakugo, who had jumped to attack All Might again. Ruka quickly sprouted her dragon wings and tail and took off after Izuku, snatching him up right as he was about to smash into Bakugo. Then she used her tail and smashed it into Bakugo's torso, sending him back. She had seen how mismatched Bakugo was against All Might. As much as she disliked the guy, she didn't want him to get beaten up to a pulp. And if she let him continue on that trajectory, he would have landed right into All Might's fist. You seriously need to rethink how to approach this, Bakugo. Ruka yelled as she started lowering herself and Izuku to the ground. Thanks, Ruka. Izuku said as Ruka landed with him a ways away from All Might. Bakugo had gotten up from the ground and started walking back towards All Might. Izuku tried to reason with him again, but he just wasn't having it. Shut up, scum. I will win this. That's what it means to be a hero, Deku. Bakugo said, walking past Izuku, who followed him, still trying to reason with him. Ruka sighed at the lack of teamwork between the two boys. Just then All Might came down from above and trapped Izuku and Ruka under a piece of a steel fence while they were distracted. Then he delivered a powerful punch to Bakugo's gut, which forced his lunch out of his mouth and sent him flying. Kaken! Izuku yelled out of concern. Dragon Soul, physical enhancement. Ruka said as she briefly glowed a blue energy and tried to force the steel fence off of her and Izuku. But the fence was in the ground deep. Bakugo slowly stood up as All Might walked up next to him, trying to give him some words of wisdom. But rather than taking those words to heart, Bakugo said he'd rather lose than get helped by a weakling like Izuku, as he put it. I see. Just remember that's what you said, hero. All Might said as he lifted his fist to deal the finishing blow. Just as he was about to smash Bakugo into the ground, Izuku and Ruka managed to free themselves. Izuku then lunged towards Bakugo and punched him out the way. Don't you dare say that you'd rather lose. Let's win this, Kaken. Izuku said as he grabbed Bakugo and hopped away into an alleyway with him slung over his shoulder, Ruka following close behind. Bakugo wasn't very happy about it. Drop me, you bastard. Bakugo said as Izuku kept running, ignoring him. I got you. Izuku said, continuing to run with Bakugo on his shoulder. I told you to put me down, damn it. Bakugo said as he hit Izuku, which caused him to fall down and drop him. They both panted as Izuku tried to give Bakugo a bit of a pep talk, reminding him the words he'd been saying since they were little kids. The most amazing hero always wins. You've been saying those words since we were little kids. How can you give up now? Izuku said as Bakugo let out an enraged roar and exploded his hand into the wall right next to Izuku's head. Then Bakugo said that All Might's speed was insane, so fighting him was inevitable. But then Izuku brought up they had no chance in a fight against him, which made Bakugo mad again. Shut the hell up before I kill you. Bakugo yelled at Izuku before starting to explain a plan he devised. They would use his gauntlets to land a powerful sneak attack on All Might and then have Ruka's Dragon Soul Spirit Summon serve as a distraction, as the three of them would quickly flee towards the escape gate. They found the number 1 pro hero jogging around looking for them. Bakugo then jumped out from the alleyway behind him. You're going the wrong way. Bakugo yelled as he let off a blast right in his face. Then Izuku came out on his other side and released a huge blast using Bakugo's gauntlet. The recoil threw out his shoulder a little. Bakugo and Izuku then fled the scene as Ruka summoned the dragon spirit, then joined them, flying alongside them using her wings from her partial transformation. We're almost there. We just have to make it to the gate. A little further. It looks kinda ridiculous, but if we can get through, we'll pass the final exam. Izuku said, starting to look a little hopeful. It doesn't look like All Might is chasing us. Don't tell me we actually knocked him out back there. Izuku said as Bakugo got annoyed. Of course not. You're the one who keeps crying about how it's impossible to actually beat him. There's no way that attack code him. When he catches up to us, it'll be my turn to blast him to hell with a gauntlet. Bakugo said as Ruka felt the dragon spirit return to her. Then before she could even warn Izuku and Bakugo, All Might practically appeared below her. Interesting. And then what will you do? All Might asked as he ran alongside them. Before Bakugo could react, All Might punched his gauntlet which broke it into pieces. Then he punched the gauntlet Izuku was wearing and broke that one too. Ruka's eyes widened. Alright heroes, it's time for you all to die. All Might said as he punched up towards Ruka who got caught in the wind pressure and was forced upwards into the bottom of a bridge above, knocking the wind out of her. Then he kneed Bakugo in the chin and sent him flying into a building a ways away. Izuku tried to go after him, but All Might caught him by the arm. That's my line. Bakugo said as he bounced back towards All Might, but All Might used Izuku like a fly swatter to slam Bakugo into the ground. When the dust cleared, Izuku was seen dangling by his arm in All Might's grasp and Bakugo was under his foot. He explained that the little bit of teamwork that they showed wasn't enough because teamwork was a requirement of the exam, not an option. He then saw Izuku struggling to get free, so he threw him. He rolled a few times after hitting the ground. All Might then said it was over, to which Bakugo told him to shut up and made a huge explosion directed right up at All Might. Then he grabbed Izuku and threw him as he went to face All Might himself, setting off huge blast after huge blast. Ruka then sprung into action, sprouting her dragon wings again and grabbing Izuku and flying him towards the escape gate. But just then, All Might crashed into Izuku, ripping him out of her grasp and messing up his back in the process. Izuku was sent flying into a bus. Ruka rushed over to him and slung his arm over her shoulder and helped him walk. All Might was focused on Bakugo, having pinned him against the ground. Bakugo was barely staying conscious, his explosions just puffs of smoke now. Izuku activated One for All again. Ruka, I'm gonna attack All Might, then grab Kaken and make a run for the escape gate. I need you to stall All Might long enough for us to make it to the gate. Then, when you see an opening, make a break for it yourself. Izuku said as Ruka nodded and Izuku took off towards All Might. Please get out of the way. Move All Might. Smash. Izuku said as he delivered a powerful punch to All Might's face. Then he grabbed Bakugo, who was now unconscious, and ran with him towards the escape gate. All Might got up and turned around but was faced with Ruka in her full dragon form with the dragon spirit by her side. I am not going to let you pass. Ruka said firmly as she and the dragon spirit stood their ground, both towering above All Might. He didn't attack, he just covered his mouth with his hand and coughed as his body began to steam. Ruka noticed blood on the hand that he had used to cover his mouth. All Might was at his limit. Knowing that, Ruka turned around and took to the sky, flying above the escape gate, returning to her base human form after passing over the gate. Then she called back the dragon spirit. The three of them had passed the practical exam.